things. I don't get it. I never really got it. I never really understood it. Dun, dun, dun. I should actually fix the formatting of this again. Weird. Move that over to the side. No, not that. Keep that. Keep that where it's at. There, I guess. I think around there should be good. I need to check, and if I could actually get to my load game. There we go. To the actual load game that I'm wanting. Perfect. I can make it actually a little bit bigger. I'm going to do just that, dude. So slowly. There we go. How does that look? How's that looking? How's that going? How are things going in general? That was loud. Louder than I wanted it to be. There we go. That's fine. Alright, we're going to turn off the volume for this. And now I can actually get to what I wanted to do for my intro thing. I don't think I've ever watched that animation. Dude, that is so fucking weird. Anywho, what is up, everyone? Welcome on into the stream. My name is Bunkatron, and you already know the drill. We are back with another episode of a bot reading us a book for our school, which we are going to be finishing the rest of Solaris. So we got the first part of it in, and I think that I am just going to take, hang on, where's, actually, no, it's right here. From where we left off, I don't know exactly where we were. Actually, could I scroll like this? Or is it gonna, it's probably gonna take the thing off. No, it doesn't matter. You guys know where we left off if you were reading into the book. So we are going to continue off. We're going to go at 2x speed, and we are just going to keep on playing some more Banjo Kazooie. So chill out, relax, ask questions, just chill out. I don't really care. I'm going to play a game. I'm going to be doing my school stuff, and that's all that matters. So if you're here for a long ride, then you are here. And if you're not, then you're not even hearing what I'm saying. So we're going to play this, and we're going to get on
the mission suggested by Sartorius. I wanted to
shoot.
glance
There we go.
through the literature dealing with magnetic fields and neutrino structures.
We need to get through here first.
Not yet have any clear idea on how I would set about it.
I'll get
but
that
I
after I get back.
Mind to make an independent check on Sartorius's activities. Not that I would. Prevent Snow and Sartorius from liberating themselves when the Annihilator was completed. I meant to take Rhea out of the station and wait for the conclusion of the operation in the cabin of an aircraft.
Damn it. Oh, I'm dead.
I set to work with the automatic librarian. Sometimes it answered my
Oh, I'm
queries by
so
including
fucked.
the laconic inscription not on sometimes it practically subverts
damn.
Under such
Actually, you know what? Who cares?
specialist
Just
textbooks,
fucking
and I hesitated to use its
like that.
advice. Yet I had no desire to leave the big circular chamber. I felt at ease in my egg, among the rows of cabinets crammed with tape and microfilm. Situated right at the center of the station, the library had no windows. It was the most isolated area in the great steel shell, and made me feel relaxed in spite of finding my researches held up. Wandering across the vast room, I stopped at a set of shelves as high as the ceiling, and holding about 600 volumes, all classics on the history of Solaris, starting with the 9 volumes of Gizi's monumental and already relatively obsolescent monograph. Display for its own sake was improbable in these surroundings. The collection was a respectful tribute to the memory of the pioneers. I took down the massive volumes of Gizi and sat leafing through them. Rhea had also located some reading matter. Looking over her shoulder,
Okay, so I can't
saw
do
that
it.
she had
Okay,
picked one
good.
of the many books brought out by the first
Perfect.
expedition, the interplanetary cookery book, which could have been the personal property of Gizi himself.
There is a pair of
She was poring over
boots
the recipes adapted
somewhere.
to the arduous conditions of interstellar flight. I said
Oh,
nothing,
it's up there.
and returned
Okay,
to
cool.
the book resting on my knees. Solaris' 10 years of exploration had appeared as volumes 4 to 12 of the Solar Iana collection, whose most recent editions were numbered in the thousands. Gizi was an unemotional man, but then in the study of Solaris, emotion is a hindrance to the explorer. imagination and premature theorizing are positive. Disadvantages in approaching a planet where it has become clear anything is possible. It is almost certain that the unlikely descriptions of the plasmatic metamorphoses of the ocean are faithful accounts of the phenomena observed. Although these descriptions are unverifiable, since the ocean seldom repeats.
I'm gonna go in there later.
The freakish character and gigantic scale of these phenomena go too far outside the experience of man to be grasped by anybody observing them for the first time, and who would consider analogous occurrences as sports of nature. Accidental manifestations of blind forces, if he saw them on a reduced scale, say, in a mud volcano on Earth. Genius and mediocrity alike are dumbfounded by the teeming diversity of the oceanic formations of Solaris. No man has ever become genuinely conversant with them.
Don't slide.
He was by no means a mediocrity, nor was he a genius. He was a scholarly classifier, the type whose compulsive application to their work utterly divorces them from the pressures of everyday life. Easy devised a plain, descriptive terminology, supplemented by terms of his own invention, and although these were inadequate, and sometimes clumsy, it has to be admitted that no semantic system is as yet available to illustrate the behavior of the ocean. The tree mountains, extensors, fungoids, memoids, symmetriads, and asymmetriads,
I need to go into later in order to get that.
Terms, but they do give some impression of Solaris to anyone who has only seen the planet in blurred photographs and incomplete films. The fact is that in spite of his cautious nature, the scrupulous Geezy more than once jumped to premature conclusions. Even when on their guard, human beings inevitably theorize. Geezy, who thought himself immune to temptation, decided that the extensors came into the category of basic forms. He compared them to accumulations of gigantic waves, similar to the tidal movements of our terran oceans. In the first edition of his work, we find them originally named as tides. This geocentrism might be considered amusing if it did not underline the dilemma in which he found himself. As soon as the question of comparisons with Earth arises, it must be understood that the extensors are formations that dwarf the Grand Canyon, that they are produced in a substance which externally resembles a yeasty colloid. During this fantastic fermentation, the yeast sets into festoons of starched openwork lace. Some experts refer to ossified tumors, and that deeper down the substance becomes increasingly resistant, like a tense muscle which 50 feet below the surface is as hard as rock but retains its flexibility. The extensor appears to be an independent creation, stretching for miles between membranous walls swollen with ossified growths, like some colossal python which after swallowing a mountain is sluggishly digesting the meal, while a slow shudder occasionally ripples along its creeping body. The extensor only looks like a lethargic reptile from overhead. At close quarters, when the two canyon walls loom hundreds of yards above the exploring aircraft, it can be seen that this inflated cylinder, reaching from one side of the horizon to the other, is bewilderingly alive with movement. First you notice the continual rotating motion of a grayish-green, oily sludge which reflects blinding sunlight, but skimming just above the back of the python, the ravine sheltering the extensor now resembles the sides of a geological fault. You realize that the motion is in fact far more complex, and consists of concentric fluctuations traversed by darker currents. Occasionally this mantle turns into a shining crust that reflects sky and clouds and then is riddled by explosive eruptions of the internal gases and fluids. The observer slowly realizes that he is looking at the guiding forces that are thrusting outward and upward the two gradually crystallizing gelatinous walls. Science does not accept the obvious without further proof.
I forgot about that, and it's not there.
Virulent controversies have reverberated down the years on the key question of the exact sequence of events in the interior of the extensors that furrow the vast living ocean in their millions. Various organic functions have been ascribed to the extensors. Some experts have argued that their purpose is the transformation of matter, others suggested respiratory processes, still others claimed that they conveyed alimentary materials. An infinite variety of hypotheses now molder in library basements, illuminated by ingenious, sometimes dangerous experiments. Today, the scientists will go no further than to refer to the extensors as relatively simple, stable formations whose duration is measurable in weeks. An exceptional characteristic among the recorded phenomena of the planet. The memoid formations are considerably more complex and bizarre.
Damn it. I thought I could do something there.
Response from the observer, an instinctive response. Me. It can be stated without exaggeration that Geezy fell in love with them. Memoids and was soon devoting all his time to them. For the rest of his life, he studied and described them and brought all his ingenuity to bear on defining their nature. The name he gave them indicates their most astonishing characteristic, the imitation of objects, near or far, external to the ocean itself. Concealed at first beneath the ocean surface, a large flattened disc appears. Ragged, with a tar-like coating. After a few hours, it begins to separate into flat sheets which rise slowly. The observer now becomes a spectator at what looks like a fight to the death, as massed ranks of waves converge from all directions. Like contorted, fleshy mouths which snap greedily around the tattered, fluttering leaf, then plunge into the depths. As each ring of waves breaks and sinks, the fall of this mass of hundreds of thousands of tons is accompanied for an instant by a Viscous rumbling, an immense thunderclap. The turbulent
All
is
right.
well. Battered and torn apart, with every fresh assault, circular
It's been
fragments
a while
scatter
since
and
I've been here.
drift like feebly fluttering wings below the ocean surface.
I want to make sure that the audio is doing okay, because every once in a while I should actually check
Urge
it.
and rise again, and drag with them.
Yeah, there we go.
Coagulated shreds of the base of the primal disc. The encircling. Waves continue to break around the steadily expanding crater. This phenomenon may persist for a day or linger on for a month, and sometimes there are no further developments. The conscientious Gizi dubbed this first variation egg stillbirth, convinced that each of these upheavals aspired towards an ultimate condition, the major mimoid, like a polyp colony, only covering an area greater than a town, of pale outcroppings with the faculty of imitating foreign bodies. Ovens, on the other hand, saw this final stage as constituting a degeneration or necrosis. According to him, the appearance of the copies corresponded to a localized dissipation of the life energies of the ocean, which was no longer in control of the original forms it created. Gizi would not abandon his account of the various phases of the process as a sustained progression towards perfection, with a conviction which is particularly surprising coming from a man of such a moderate, cautious turn of mind in advancing the most trivial hypothesis on the other creations of the ocean. Normally he had all the boldness of an ant crawling up a glacier. Viewed from above, the mimoid resembles a town, an illusion produced by our compulsion to superimpose analogies with what we know. When the sky is clear, a shimmering heat haze covers the pliant structures of the clustered polyps, surmounted by membranous palisades. The first cloud passing overhead wakens the mimoid. All the outcrops suddenly sprout new shoots, then the massive polyps ejects a thick tegument which dilates, puffs out, changes color, and in the space of a few minutes has produced an astonishing imitation of the volutes of a cloud. The enormous object casts a reddish shadow over the mimoid, whose peaks ripple and bend together, always in the opposite direction to the movement of the real cloud. I imagine that Gizi would have been ready to give his right hand to discover what made the mimoids behave in this way, but these isolated productions are nothing in comparison to the frantic activity the mimoid displays when stimulated by objects of human origin. The reproduction process embraces every object inside a radius of 8 or 9 miles. Usually the facsimile is an enlargement of the original, whose forms are sometimes only roughly copied. The reproduction of machines, in particular, elicits simplifications that might be considered grotesque practically. Caricatures. The copy is always modeled in the same colorless tegument, which hovers above the outcrops, linked to its base by flimsy umbilical cords. It slides, creeps, curls back on itself, shrinks or swells, and finally assumes the most complicated forms. An aircraft, a net, or a pole are all reproduced at the same speed. The mimoid is not stimulated by human beings themselves, and in fact it does not react to any living matter, and has never copied, for example, the plants imported for experimental purposes. On the other hand, it will readily reproduce a puppet or a doll, a carving of a god, or a tree sculpted in any material. The observer must bear in mind that the obedience of the mimoid
There we go. Easy.
constitute evidence of cooperation, since it is not consistent. The most highly
That was close. So many of you died.
in slow motion, or its pulsation weakens. This pulsation is invisible to the naked eye, and was only discovered after close examination of rapid motion film of the mimoid, which revealed that each beat took 2 hours. During these off days, it is easy to explore the mimoid, especially if it is whole, for the base anchored in the ocean, like the protuberances growing out of it, is relatively solid, and provides a firm footing for a man. It is equally possible to remain inside the mimoid during periods of activity, except that visibility is close to nil because of the whitish colloidal dust continually emitted through tears in the tegument above. In any case, at close range it is impossible to distinguish what forms the tegument is assuming, on account of their vast size. The smallest copy is the size of a mountain.
Find your
In
reward.
addition, a thick layer of colloidal snow quickly covers the base of the mimoid. This spongy carpet takes several hours to solidify. The frozen crust will take the weight of a man, though its composition is much lighter than pumice stone. The problem is that without special equipment there is a risk of being lost in the maze of tangled structures and crevasses, sometimes reminiscent of jumbled colonnades, sometimes of petrified geysers. Even in daylight it is easy to lose one's direction, for the sun's rays cannot pierce the white ceiling ejected into the atmosphere by the imitative explosions. On gala days, for the scientist as well as for the mimoid, an unforgettable spectacle develops as the mimoid goes into hyperproduction and performs wild flights of fancy. It plays variations on the theme of a given object and embroiders formal extensions that amuse it for hours on end, to the delight of the non-figurative artist and the despair of the scientist, who is at a loss to grasp any common theme in the performance. The mimoid can produce primitive.
Oh, I can't do the bomb thing yet because I haven't freaking learned it. Damn it.
Deviations, paroxysms of extravagant brilliance.
Let's open now, so I'll just do that later in a second.
Comic forms. Looking at the photographs, I have never been moved to laughter. The riddle they set is too disquieting to be funny. During the early years of exploration, the scientists literally threw themselves upon the mimoids, which were spoken of as open windows on the ocean and the best opportunity to establish the hoped for contact between the two civilizations. They were soon forced to admit that there was not the slightest prospect of communication, and that the entire process began and ended with the reproduction of forms. The Mimoids were a dead end, giving way to the temptations of a latent anthropomorphism or zoomorphism. There were many schools of thought which saw various other oceanic formations as sensory organs, even as limbs, which was how experts like Martins and Econa classified Gizi's vertebrates and Nagilas for a time. Anyone who is rash enough to see protuberances that reach as far as 2 miles into the atmosphere as limbs might just as well claim that earthquakes are the gymnastics of the Earth's crust. 300 chapters of Gizi catalog the standard formations which occur on the surface of the living ocean and which can be seen in dozens, even hundreds, in the course of any day. The simitriads, to continue using the terminology and definitions of the Gizi school, are the least human formations, which is to say that they bear no resemblance whatsoever to anything on Earth. By the time the simitriads were being investigated, it was already clear that the ocean was not aggressive, and that its plasmatic eddies would not swallow.
I think I actually played this around Christmas time 2 years ago.
It is possible to fly in complete safety from one part to another of the cylindrical body of an extensor, or of the vertebrates, Jacob's ladders oscillating among the clouds. The plasma retreats at the speed of sound in the planet's atmosphere to make way for any foreign body. Deep funnels will open even beneath the surface of the ocean, at a prodigious expenditure of energy, calculated by Scriabin at around 19 ergs. Nevertheless, the first venture into the interior of a simitriad was undertaken with the utmost caution and discipline, and involved a host of what turned out to be unnecessary safety measures. Every schoolboy on Earth knows of these pioneers. It is not their nightmare appearance that makes the gigantic simitriad formations dangerous, but the total instability and capriciousness of their structure, in which even the laws of physics do not hold. The theory that the living ocean is endowed with intelligence has found its firmest adherents among those scientists who have ventured into their unpredictable depths. The birth of a simitriad comes like a sudden eruption. About an hour beforehand, an area of tens of square miles of ocean vitrifies and begins to shine. It remains fluid, and there is no alteration in the rhythm of the waves. Occasionally the phenomenon of vitrification occurs in the neighborhood of the funnel left by an Aegeus.
Can't fear if they don't know what you're doing.
The ocean heaves upwards to form a vast ball that reflects sky, sun, clouds, and the entire horizon in a medley of changing, variegated images. Diffracted light creates a kaleidoscopic play of color. The effects of light on a simitriad are especially striking during the blue day and the red sunset. The planet appears to be giving birth to a twin that increases in volume from one moment to the next. The immense flaming globe has scarcely reached its maximum expansion above the ocean when it bursts in. The summit cracks vertically. It is not breaking up. This is the second phase, which goes under the clumsy name of the floral calyx phase and lasts only a few seconds. The membranous arches soaring into the sky now fold inwards and merge to produce a thick-set trunk enclosing a scene of teeming activity. At the center of the trunk, which was explored for the first time by the 70-man Himalaya expedition, a process of polycrystallization on a giant scale erects an axis commonly referred to as the backbone, a term which I consider ill-chosen. The mind-bending architecture of this central pillar is held in place by vertical shafts of a gelatinous, almost liquid consistency, constantly gushing upwards out of wide crevasses. Meanwhile, the entire trunk is surrounded by a belt of snow, foam, seething with great bubbles of gas, and the whole process is accompanied by a perpetual dull roar of sound. From the center towards the periphery, powerful buttresses spin out and are coated with streams of ductile matter rising out of the ocean depths. Simultaneously, the gelatinous geysers are converted into mobile columns that proceed to extrude tendrils that reach out in clusters towards points rigorously predetermined by the overall dynamics of the entire structure. They call to mind the gills of an embryo, except that they are revolving at fantastic speed and use trickles of pinkish blood in a dark green secretion. The simitriad now begins to display its most exotic characteristic, the property of illustrating, sometimes contradicting, various laws of physics. Bear in mind that no two simitriads are alike, and that the geometry of each one is a unique invention of the living ocean. The interior of the simitriad becomes a factory for the production of monumental machines, as these constructs are sometimes called, although they resemble no machine which it is within the power of mankind to build. The designation is applied because all this activity has finite ends, and is therefore in some sense mechanical. When the geysers of oceanic matter have solidified into pillars or into three-dimensional networks of galleries and passages, and the membranes are set into an inextricable pattern of stories, panels, and vaults, the simitriad justifies its name, for the entire structure is divided into two segments, each mirroring the other to the most infinitesimal detail. After 20 or 30 minutes, when the axis may have tilted as much as 8 to 10 degrees from the horizontal, the giant begins slowly to subside. Simitriads vary in size, but as the base begins to submerge, even the smallest reach a height of half a mile, and are visible from miles away. At last, the structure stabilizes itself, and the partly submerged simitriad ceases its activity. It is now possible to explore it in complete safety by making an entry near the summit through one of the many siphons which emerge from the dome. The completed symmetriad represents a spatial analog of some transcendental equation. It is a commonplace that any equation can be expressed in the figurative language of non-Euclidean geometry and represented in 3 dimensions. This interpretation relates the symmetriad to Lobachevsky's cones and Riemann's negative curves, although its unimaginable complexity makes the relationship highly tenuous. The eventual form occupies an area of several cubic miles and
Damn it!
extends far beyond our whole system of mathematics. In addition, this extension is 4-dimensional for the fundamental terms of the equations used
Dive straight fucking down, basically.
Changes over a given period.
I forgot I need to cancel it by using another feather.
The symmetriad is a computer of the living ocean, performing calculations for a purpose that we are not able to grasp. This was Fremont's theory, now generally discounted. The hypothesis was a tempting one, but it proved impossible to sustain the concept that the living ocean examined problems of matter, the cosmos, and existence through the medium of titanic eruptions, in which every particle had an indispensable function as a controlled element in an analytical system of infinite purity. In fact, numerous phenomena contradict this oversimplified, some say, childishly naive concept. Any number of attempts have been made to transpose and illustrate the symmetriad, and Aberrayan's demonstration was particularly well received. Let us imagine, he said, an edifice dating from the great days of Babylon, but built of some living, sensitive substance with the capacity to evolve. The architectonics of this edifice passed through a series of phases, and we see it adopt the forms of a Greek, then of a Roman building.
Fuck off.
The columns sprout like branches and become narrower, the roof grows lighter, rises, curves, the arch describes an abrupt parabola, then breaks down into a narrow shape. The Gothic is born, comes to maturity and gives way in time to new forms. Austerity of line gives way to a riot of exploding lines and shapes, and the Baroque runs wild. If the progression continues and the successive mutations are to be seen as stages in the life of an evolving organism, we finally arrive at the architecture of the space age, and perhaps too at some understanding of the symmetriad. Unfortunately, no matter how this demonstration may be expanded and unproved, there have been attempts to visualize it with the aid of models and films. The comparison remains superficial. It is evasive and illusory, and sidesteps the central fact that the symmetriad is quite unlike anything Earth has ever produced. The human mind is only capable of absorbing a few things at a time. We see what is taking place in front of us in the here and now, and cannot envisage simultaneously a succession of processes.
Fuck off! Get me out of the water.
Complementary. Our faculties of perception are consequently limited even as regards fairly simple phenomena. The fate of a single man can be rich with significance, that of a few hundred less so, but the history of thousands and millions of men does not mean anything at all, in any adequate sense of the word. The symmetriad is a million a billion, rather raised to the power of n. It is incomprehensible. We pass through vast halls, each with a capacity of 10.
Take care of those fuckers later.
Units, and creep like so many ants clinging to the folds of breathing.
So stupid.
Vaults and craning to watch the flight of soaring girders, opalescent in the glare of searchlights.
Yeah, I'll come after you later.
And balance each other.
Actually, no, there's something I need to go in there for as my normal self.
The essence of this architecture is movement synchronized towards a precise objective. We observe a fraction of the process,
I have
like
to do
hearing
that
the
later.
vibration of a
Fuck off.
single string in an orchestra of supergiants. We know, but cannot grasp, that above and below, beyond the limits of perception or imagination, thousands and millions of simultaneous transformations are at
This is
work.
the ending of the race.
Like a musical score by mathematical counterpoint. It has been described as a symphony in geometry, but we lack the ears to hear it. Only a long-distance view would reveal the entire process, but the outer covering of the symmetriad conceals the colossal inner matrix where creation is unceasing. The created becomes the creator, and absolutely identical twins are born at opposite poles, separated by towering structures and miles of distance. The symphony creates itself, and writes its own conclusion, which is terrible to watch. Every observer feels like a spectator at a tragedy or a public massacre. When after 2 or 3 hours, never longer, the living ocean stages its assault. The polished surface of the ocean swirls and crumples, the desiccated foam liquefies again, begins to seethe, and legions of waves pour inwards from every point of the horizon, their gaping mouths far more massive than the greedy lips that surround the embryonic memory. The submerged base of the symmetriad is compressed, and the colossus rises as if on the point of being shot out of the planet's gravitational pull. The upper layers of the ocean redouble their activity, and the waves surge higher and higher to lick against the sides of the symmetriad. They envelop it, harden and plug the orifices, but their attack is nothing compared to the scene in the interior. First, the process of creation freezes momentarily, then there is panic. The smooth interpenetration of moving forms and the harmonious play of planes and lines accelerates, and the impression is inescapable that the symmetriad is hurrying to complete some task. In the face of danger, the awe inspired by the metamorphosis and dynamics.
So this is just a random process that happens on this fucking planet.
and droop, and wrong notes incomplete, mangled forms make their appearance. A powerful moaning roar issues from the invisible depths like a sigh of agony, reverberates through the narrow funnels and booms through them. Collapsing domes. In spite of the growing destructive violence of these convulsions, the spectator is rooted to the spot. Only the force of the hurricane, streaming out of the depths and howling through the thousands of galleries, keeps the great structure erect. Soon it subsides and starts to disintegrate. There are final flutterings, contortions, and blind, random spasms. Not end. Undermined, the giant sinks slowly and disappears, and the space where it stood is covered with whirlpools of foam. So what does all this mean? I remembered an incident dating from my spell as assistant to Gibberian. A group of school children visiting the Solarist Institute in Aden were making their way through the main hall of the library and looking at the racks of microfilm that occupied the entire left-hand side of the hall. The guide explained that among other phenomena immortalized by the image, these contained fragmentary glimpses of symmetriads long since vanished, not single shots, but whole reels, more than 90,000 of them. One plump schoolgirl, she looked about 15, peering inquisitively over her spectacles, abruptly asked, "And what is it for?" In the ensuing embarrassed silence, the school mistress was content to dart a reproving look at her wayward pupil. Among the Solarists whose job was to act as guides, I was one of them. No one would produce an answer. Each symmetriad is unique, and the developments in its heart are, generally speaking, unpredictable. Sometimes there is no sound. Sometimes the index of refraction increases or diminishes. Sometimes, rhythmic pulsations are accompanied by local changes in gravitation, as if the heart of the symmetriad were beating by gravitating. Sometimes the compasses of the observers spin wildly, and ionized layers spring up and disappear. The catalog could go on indefinitely. In any case, even if we did ever succeed in solving the riddle of the symmetriads, we would still have to contend with the asymmetriads. The asymmetriads are born in the same manner as the symmetriads, but finish differently, and nothing can be seen of their internal processes except tremors, vibrations, and flickering. We do know, however, that the interior houses bewildering operations performed at a speed that defies the laws of physics and which are dubbed giant quantic phenomena. The mathematical analogy with certain three-dimensional models of the atom is so unstable and transitory that some commentators dismiss the resemblances of secondary importance, if not purely accidental. The asymmetriads have a very short lifespan of 15 to 20 minutes, and their death is even more appalling than that of the symmetriads, with the howling gale that screams through its fabric. Thick fluid gushes out, gurgles hideously, and submerges everything beneath it. Foul, bubbling foam. Then an explosion, coinciding with a muddy eruption, hurls up a spout of debris which rains slowly down into the seething ocean. This debris is sometimes found scores of miles from the focus of the explosion, dried up, yellow and flattened, like flakes of cartilage. Some other creations of the ocean, which are much more rare and of very variable duration, part company with the parent body entirely. The first traces of these independents were identified wrongly. It was later proved as the remains of creatures inhabiting the ocean deeps. The free-ranging forms are often reminiscent of many winged birds, darting away from the moving trunks of them. Agilis, but the preconceptions of Earth offer no assistance in unraveling them. Mysteries of Solaris. Strange, seal-like bodies appear now and then on the rocky outcrop of an island, sprawling in the sun or dragging themselves lazily back to merge with the ocean. There was no escaping the impressions that grew out of man's experience on Earth. The prospects of contact receded. Explorers traveled hundreds of miles in the depths of symmetriads, and installed measuring instruments and remote control cameras. Artificial satellites captured the birth of mimoids and extensors, and faithfully reproduced their images of growth and destruction. The libraries overflowed, the archives grew, and the price paid for all this documentation was often very heavy. One notorious disaster cost 106 people their lives, among them Gizi himself. While studying what was undoubtedly a symmetriad, the expedition was suddenly destroyed by a process peculiar to the asymmetriads. In 2 seconds, an eruption of glutinous mud swallowed up 79 men and all their equipment.
That's
Another
fun.
27 observers surveying the area from aircraft and helicopters were also caught in the eruption. Following the eruption of the 106, and for the first time in Solarist studies, there were petitions demanding a thermonuclear attack on the ocean. Such a response would have been more cruelty than revenge, since it would have meant destroying what we did not understand. Sankin's ultimatum,
Why did my lights turn
which
off?
was never officially acknowledged, probably influenced the negative outcome of the vote. He was in command of Gizi's reserve team,
Stop.
and had survived on
Pause. Why did my lights turn off? They were. What'd you do? What happened? I mean, I don't have to have them on. But I hate to tell you this, but they were connected well. They were. You say that they're connected, but they're not. Okay, we're just gonna have them off then, I guess. Weird. I don't know why they turned off. I'm gonna turn this up a little bit more. It's not the biggest deal, but it's like my background PC lights, which help. They don't help, but they look nice.
Survived owing to a transmission error that took him off his course to arrive at the disaster area a few minutes after the explosion, when the black mushroom cloud was still visible.
Damn it.
Informed of the proposal for a nuclear strike, he threatened to blow up the station, together with the 19 survivors sheltering inside it. Today, there are only 3 of us on the station. Its construction was controlled by satellites, and was a technical feat on which the human race has a right to pride itself, even if the ocean builds far more impressive structures in the space of a few seconds. The station is a disk of 100 yards radius, and
Okay, Mumbo.
contains 4
I
decks at
can't
the
use
center and 2
Mumbo.
at the circumference. It is maintained at a height of from 5 to 1,500 yards above the ocean by gravitors, programmed to compensate for the ocean's own field of attraction. In addition to all the machines available to ordinary stations and the large artificial satellites that orbit other planets, the Solaris station is equipped with specialized radar apparatus sensitive to the smallest fluctuations of the ocean surface, which trips auxiliary power circuits capable of thrusting the steel disk into the stratosphere at the first indication of new plasmatic upheavals. But today, in spite of the presence of our faithful visitors, the station was strangely deserted. Ever since the robots had been locked away in the lower deck storerooms for a reason I had still not discovered, it had been possible to walk around without meeting a single member of the crew of our ghost ship. As I replaced the 9th volume of Easy on the shelf, the plastic-coated steel floor seemed to shudder under my feet. I stood still, but the vibration had stopped.
Juked him.
The library was completely isolated from the other rooms, and the only possible source of vibration must be a shuttle leaving the station. This thought jerked me back to reality. I had not yet decided to accept Sartorius's suggestion and leave the station. By feigning approval of his plan, I had been more or less postponing the outbreak of hostilities, for I was determined to save Ria. All the same, Sartorius might have some chance of success. He certainly had the advantage of being a qualified physicist, while I was in an ironic position of having to count on the superiority of the ocean. I pored over microfilm texts for an hour, and made myself wrestle with the unfamiliar language of neutrino physics. The undertaking seemed hopeless at first. There were no less than 5 current theories dealing with neutrino fields, an obvious indication that none was definitive. Eventually I struck promising ground, and was busily copying down equations when there was a knock at the door. I got up quickly and opened it a few inches, to see Snow's perspiring face, and behind him an empty corridor. Yes, it's me.
Definitely need to kill the
His voice was
snowman to
hoarse,
see if
and there were
I'm
dark
missing
patches
any
of bloodshot
no
eyes. He wore
pieces.
an anti-radiation apron of shiny rubber, and the same worn old trousers held up by elastic braces. Snow's gaze flickered round the circular chamber and alighted on Ria, where she stood by an armchair at the other end. Then it returned to me, and I lowered my eyelids imperceptibly. He nodded, and I spoke casually. Ria, come and meet Dr. Snow. Snow, my wife. Hi. I'm just a minor member of the crew.
Wouldn't you know, I
Don't
am
worry
that
about much.
bear.
He faltered, but managed to blurt out. That's why I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before. Ria smiled and held out her hand, which he shook in some surprise. He blinked several times and stood looking at her, tongue-tied, until I took him by the arm. Excuse me, he said to Ria. I wanted a word with you, Kelvin. Of course. My composure was an ugly charade, but what else could I do? Take no notice of us, Ria. We'll be talking shop. I guided Snow over to the chairs on the far side of the room, and Ria sat in the armchair I had occupied earlier, swiveling it so that she could glance up at us from her book. I lowered my voice. Any news? I'm divorced, he whispered. If anybody had quoted this to me as the opening of a conversation a few days before, I would have burst out laughing. But the station had blunted my sense of humor. It feels like years since. Yesterday morning, he went on. And you? Nothing. I was at a loss for words. I liked Snow, but I distrusted him, or rather I distrusted the purpose of his visit. Nothing? Surely. What? I pretended not to understand. Eyes half shut, he leaned so close to me that I could feel his breath on my face. This business has all of us confused, Kelvin. I can't make contact with Sartorius. All I know is what I wrote to you, which is what he told me after our little conference. Has he disconnected his video phone? No, there's been a short circuit at his end. He could have done it on purpose, but there's also... He clenched his fist and mimed somebody aiming a punch, curling his lips in an unpleasant grin. Kelvin, I came here to... What do you intend doing? You want my answer to your letter? All right, I'll go on the trip. There's no reason for me to refuse. I've only been getting ready. No, he interrupted. It isn't that. What then? Go on. Sartorius thinks he may be on the right track, Snow muttered. His eyes
About what?
never left me, and I had to stay still and try to look casual. It all started with that X-ray experiment that he and Ryan arranged, you remember? That could have produced some alteration. What kind of alteration? They beamed the rays directly into the ocean. The intensity was only modulated according to a preset program. I know. It's already been done by
There's
Nolan
all
and a lot
4
of
left
others.
of them.
Yes, but the others worked on low power.
Not right
This
now.
time they used everything we had. That could lead to trouble, violating the 4-power convention, and the United Nations. Come on, Kelvin, you know as well as I do that it doesn't matter now. Ryan is dead. So Sartorius makes him the scapegoat. I don't know. We haven't talked about that. Sartorius is intrigued by the visiting hours. They only come as we wake up, which suggests that the ocean is especially interested in our sleeping hours, and that is when it locates its patterns. Sartorius wants to send our waking selves our conscious thoughts. You see, by mail. Keep the jokes to yourself. The idea is to modulate the X-rays by hooking in an electroencephalograph taken from one of us. Light was beginning to dawn. And that one of us is me. Yes, Sartorius had you in mind. Tell him I'm flattered. Will you do it? I hesitated. Snow darted a look at Rhea, who seemed absorbed in her book. I felt my face turn pale. Well, the idea of using X-rays to preach sermons on the greatness of mankind seems absolutely ridiculous to me. Don't you think so? You mean it? Yes. Right, he said, smiling as if I had fallen in with some idea of his own. Then you're opposed to the plan. His expression told me that he had somehow been a step ahead of me all the time. Okay, he went on. There is a second plan to construct a Roche apparatus. An annihilator. Yes. Sartorius has already made the preliminary calculations. It is feasible. And it won't even require any great expenditure of energy. The apparatus will generate a negative field 24 hours a day, and for an unlimited period. And its effect.
Damn it.
Simple.
Damn it.
It will be a negative neutrino field. Ordinary matter will not
Shit, I messed up.
Only the neutrino structures will be destroyed. You see.
Fuck.
Gave me a
I messed up.
satisfied grin.
No.
I stood stock still and gave
Damn it.
so that he
I'm going back.
stopped smiling, looked at me with a frown, and waited a moment before speaking.
Damn it.
We abandoned the first plan then, the brainwave plan. Sartorius is working on the other one right now. We'll call it Project Liberation. I had to make a quick decision.
Project
Snow
Liberation.
was no physicist, and Sartorius's video phone was disconnected or smashed. I took the chance. I'd rather call the second idea Operation Slaughterhouse. And you ought to know. Don't tell me you haven't had some practice lately. Only there'll be a radical difference this time. No more visitors, no more. By creatures they will disintegrate as soon as they appear. I nodded, and managed what I hoped was a convincing smile. You haven't got the point. Morality is one thing, but self-preservation. I just don't want to get us killed, Snow. He stared back at me suspiciously, as I showed him my scribbled equations. I've been working along the same lines. Don't look so surprised. The neutrino theory was my idea in the first place, remember? Look. Negative fields can be generated all right. And ordinary matter is unaffected. But what happens to the energy that maintains the neutrino structure when it disintegrates? There must be a considerable release of that energy. Assuming a kilogram of ordinary matter represents 10 8 Hertz, for a phi creation we get 5 7 multiplied by 10 8. That means the equivalent of a small atomic bomb exploding inside the station. You mean to tell me Sartorius won't have been over all this? It was my turn to grin maliciously. Not necessarily. Sartorius follows the Fraser-Cajala school. Their theories would indicate that the energy potential would be given off in the form of light. Powerful, yes, but not destructive. But that isn't the only theory of neutrino fields. According to Kayet, and Avalov, and Zion, the radiation spectrum would be much broader. At its maximum, there would be a strong burst of gamma radiation. Sartorius has faith in his tutors. I don't say we can't respect that, but there are other tutors, and other theories. And another thing, Snow, I could see him beginning to waver. We have to bear in mind the ocean itself is bound to have used the optimum means of designing its creations. It seems to me that we can't afford to back Sartorius against the ocean as well as the other theories.
Need to go back to Mumbo and switch back, because I don't need to be this thing anymore.
What's this? He pointed to a line of calculations. That the transformation
How
tensor.
many Jinjos do I also definitely need a save? How many Jinjos do I have?
I already knew his reply.
Missing 2. I need, where's the blue one? I know where the orange one is. It's in the hut. Not in the hut, in the
provided you
house.
realize that these theories have never been tested experimentally. Neutrino structures have been abstractions until now. Sartorius is relying on Fraser, and I've followed Zion's theory. He'll say I'm no physicist, or Zion either, not Fermi. His point of view, at least. He will dispute my figures, and I'm not going to get into the kind of argument where he tries to browbeat me for his own satisfaction. You, I can convince. I couldn't begin to convince Sartorius, and I have no intention of trying. Then what do you want to do? He's already started work. All his earlier animation had subsided, and he spoke in a monotone. I did not know if he trusted me, and I did not much care. What do I want to do? Whatever a man does when his life is in danger. I'll try to contact him. Maybe he can develop some kind of safety device. And then there's the first plan. Would you cooperate? Sartorius would agree. I'm sure of it. At least it's worth a try. You think so? No, he snapped back. But what have we got to lose? I was in no hurry to accept. It was time that I needed, and Snow could help me to prolong the delay. I'll think about it. Okay, I'm going. His bones creaked as he got up. We'll have to begin with the encephalogram, he said, rubbing at his overall as if to get rid of some invisible stain. Without a word to Rhea, he walked to the door, and after it had closed behind him, I got up and crumpled the sheet of paper in my hand. I had not falsified the equations, but I doubted whether Zion would have agreed with my extensions of his theory. I started abruptly, as Rhea's hand touched my shoulder. Chris, who is he? I told you, Dr. Snow. What's he like? I don't know him very well. Why? He was giving me such a strange look. So you're an attractive woman? No, this was a different sort of look, as if she trembled, looked up at me momentarily, and lowered her eyes. Let's go back to the cabin.
That's not what I wanted.
The liquid oxygen. I have no idea how long I had been lying in the dark, staring at the luminous dial of my wristwatch. Hearing myself breathe, I felt a big surprise, but my underlying feeling was one of profound indifference both to this ring of phosphorescent figures and to my own surprise.
Fuck.
I told myself that the feeling was caused by fatigue.
Yes.
When I turned over, the bed seemed wider than usual.
Perfect.
Held my breath. No sound broke the silence.
And then I have everything I need.
Audible. I reached out, but felt nothing. I was alone. I was about to call her name when I heard the tread of heavy footsteps coming towards me. A numb calm descended. Eve Ryan? Yes, it's me. Don't switch the light on. No. There's no need, and it's better for us to stay in the dark. But you are dead. Don't let that worry you. You recognize my voice, don't you?
Keyboard.
Yes.
What the fuck? He's dead.
Why did you kill yourself? I had no choice. You arrived 4 days late. If you had come earlier, I would not have been forced to kill myself.
Wow.
Don't worry about it, though. I don't regret anything. You really are there? I'm not asleep. Oh, you think you're dreaming about me? As you did with Rhea? Where is she? How should I know? I have a feeling that you do.
Oh, hey.
Keep your feelings for yourself. Let's say I'm deputizing for her. I want her here too. Not possible. Why not? You know very well that it isn't the real you, just mine. No, I am the real Eve Ryan, just a new incarnation. But let's not waste time on useless chatter. You'll be leaving again. Yes. And then she'll come back. Why should you care about that? She belongs to me. You are afraid of her. No. She disgusts you. What do you want with me? Save your pity for yourself, you have a right to it, but not for her. She will always be 20 years old. You must know that. I felt suddenly at ease again, for no apparent reason, and ready to hear him. How? He seemed to have come closer, though I could not see him in the dark. What do you want? Sartorius has convinced Snow that you have been deceiving him. Right. Now they are trying to give you the same treatment. Building the X-ray beamer is a cover for constructing a magnetic field disruptor. Where is she? Didn't you hear me? I came to warn you. Where is she? I don't know. Be careful. You must find some kind of weapon. You can't trust anyone. I can trust Rhea. He stifled a laugh. Of course, you can trust Rhea to some extent. And you can always follow my example, if all else fails. You are not Eve Ryan. No. Then who am I? A dream. No, you are only a puppet. But you don't realize that you are. And how do you know what you are? I tried to stand up, but could not stir. Although Eve Ryan was still speaking, I could not understand his words. There was only the drone of his voice. I struggled to regain control of my body, felt a sudden wrench, and I woke up and drew down great gulps of air. It was dark, and I had been having a
dick.
And now I heard a distant, monotonous voice, a dilemma that we are not equipped to solve. We are the cause of our own sufferings. The polythers behave strictly as a kind of amplifier of our own thoughts. Any attempt to understand the motivation of these occurrences is blocked by our own anthropomorphism. Where there are no men, there cannot be motives accessible to men. Before we can proceed with our research, either our own thoughts or Their materialized forms must be destroyed. It is not within our power to destroy. Our thoughts. As for destroying their material forms, that could be like committing murder. I had recognized Javarian's voice at once. When I stretched out my arm, I found myself alone. I had fallen asleep again. This was another dream. I called Javarian's name, and the voice stopped in mid-sentence. There was the sound of a faint gasp, then a gust of air. Well, Javarian, I yawned. You seem to be following me out of one.
I need to get the last jiggy when I have the speed shoes. So I need to go into the next area first.
And a voice whispered in my ear. Chris, it's me. Rhea?
Rhea!
What about Javarian? But, you said he was dead, Chris. He can be alive in a dream, I told her dejectedly, although I was not completely sure that it had been a dream. He spoke to me. He was here. My head sank back onto the pillow. Rhea said something, but I was already drifting into sleep. In the red light of morning, the events of the previous night returned. I had dreamt that I was talking to Javarian, but afterwards, I could swear that I had heard his voice, although I had no clear recall of what he had said, and it had not been a conversation, more like a speech. Rhea was splashing about in the bathroom.
Oh yeah, I need to have the speed shoes for that.
I
Forgot about
a
that.
few days earlier. It was no longer there. Rhea. She put her face round the door. Did you see a tape recorder? Under the bed.
Can't
a
do
little
that. Yeah, I need to wait.
There was a pile of stuff under the bed. I put it all over there. She pointed.
Can try maybe once.
Cabinet and disappeared back into the bathroom. There was no tape recorder on the shelf, and when Rhea emerged from the bathroom, I asked her to think again. She sat combing her hair and did not answer. It was not until now that I noticed how pale she was and how closely she was watching me in the mirror. I returned to the attack. The tape recorder is missing, Rhea. Is that all you have to tell me? I'm sorry. You're right. It's silly to get so worked up about a tape recorder. Anything to avoid a quarrel. Later, over breakfast, the change in Rhea's behavior was obvious, yet I could not define it. She did not meet my eyes, and was frequently so lost in thought that she did not hear me.
Oh, that's what I need it for. Gotcha.
Her cheeks were.
I can't get it until I load.
You're crying. Leave me alone, Rhea blurted. They aren't real tears. Perhaps I ought not to have let her answer so, but straight talking was the last thing I wanted. In any case, I had other problems on my mind. I had dreamt that Snow and Sartorius were plotting against me, and although I was certain that it had been nothing more than a dream, I was wondering if there was
I need the speed shoes for that.
Able to use to defend myself. My thinking had not progressed to the point of deciding what to do with the weapon once I had it. I told Rhea that I had to make an inspection of the storerooms, and she trailed behind me silently. I ransacked packing cases and capsules, and when we reached the loader deck, I was unable to resist looking into the cold store. Not wanting Rhea to go in, I put my head inside the door and looked around. The recumbent figure was still covered by its dark shroud, but from my position in the doorway I could not make out whether the black woman was still sleeping by Javarian's body. I had the impression that she was no longer there. I wandered from one storeroom to another, unable to locate anything that might serve as a weapon, and with a rising feeling of depression. All at once I noticed that Rhea was not with me. Then she reappeared. She had been hanging back in the corridor. In spite of the pain she suffered when she could not see me, she had been trying to keep away. I should have been astonished. Instead, I went on acting as if I had been offended, but then, who had offended me? And sulking like a child. My head was throbbing, and I rifled the entire contents of the medicine cabinet without finding so much as an aspirin. I did not want to go back to the sick bay. I did not want to do anything. I had never been in a blacker temper. Rhea tiptoed about the cabin like a shadow. Now and then she went off. Somewhere. I don't know where. I was paying her no attention. Then she would creep back inside. That afternoon, in the kitchen, we had just eaten, but in fact Rhea had not touched her food, and I had not attempted to persuade her. Rhea got up and came to sit next to me. I felt her hand on my sleeve, and grunted, "What's the matter?" I had been meaning to go up to the deck above, as the pipes were carrying the sharp crackling sound of high-voltage apparatus in use, but Rhea would have had to come with me. It had been hard enough to justify her presence in the library. Among the machinery, there was a chance that Snow might drop some clumsy remark. I gave up the idea of going to investigate. "Chris," she whispered, "what's happening to us?" I gave an involuntary sigh of frustration with everything that had been happening since the previous night. Everything is fine. Why? I want to talk. All right, I'm listening.
Don't.
Not like this. What? You know I have a headache, and that's not the least of my worries. You're not being fair. I forced myself to smile. It must have been a poor imitation. Go ahead and talk, darling, please. Will you tell me the truth? Why should I lie? This was an ominous beginning. You might have your reasons. It might be necessary. But if you want Look, I am going to tell you something, and then it will be your turn. Only no half-truths. Promise. I could not meet her gaze. I've already told you that I don't know how I came to be here. Perhaps you do. Wait. Perhaps you don't. But if you do know, and you can't tell me now, will you tell me one day? Later on. I couldn't be any the worse for it, and you would at least be giving me a chance. What are you talking about, child? I stammered. What chance? Chris, whatever I may be, I'm certainly not a child. You promised me an answer. Whatever I may be, my throat tightened, and I stared at Rhea shaking.
Ooh.
My head like an imbecile, as if forbidding myself to hear any more. I'm not asking for explanations. You only need to tell me that you are not allowed to say. I'm not hiding anything, I groped. All right. She stood up. I wanted to say something. We could not leave it at that. But no words would come. Rhea. She was standing at the window, with her back turned. The blue-black ocean stretched out under a cloudless sky.
How rude. Fuck you.
You know very well I love you. Me. I went to put my arms around her, but she pulled away. You're too kind, she said. You say you love me. I'd rather you beat me. Rhea, darling. No, don't say any more. She went back to the table and began to clear away the plates. I gazed out at the ocean. The sun was setting, and the station cast a lengthening shadow that danced on the waves. Rhea dropped a plate on the floor. Water splashed in the sink. A tarnished golden halo ringed the horizon. If I only knew what to do, if only. Suddenly there was silence. Rhea was standing behind me. No, don't turn round, she murmured. It isn't your fault, I know. Don't torment yourself. I reached out, but she slipped away to the far side of the room and picked up a stack of plates. It's a shame they're unbreakable. I'd like to smash them, all of them. I thought for a moment that she really was going to dash them to the floor. But she looked across at me and smiled. Don't worry, I'm not going to make scenes. In the middle of the night, I was suddenly wide awake. The room was in darkness and the door was ajar, with a faint light shining from the corridor. There was a shrill hissing noise, interspersed with heavy, muffled thudding, as if some heavy object was pounding against a wall. A meteor had pierced the shell
Oh.
of the station. No,
There you
not
go.
a meteor, a shuttle, for I could hear a dreadful labor. Whining. I shook myself. It was not a meteor, nor was it a shuttle. The sound was coming from somebody at the end of the corridor. I ran down to where light was pouring from the door of the little workroom, and rushed inside. A freezing vapor filled the room. My breath fell like snow, and white flakes swirled over a body covered by a dressing gown, stirring feebly then striking the floor again. I could hardly see through the freezing mist. I snatched her up and folded her in my arms, and the dressing gown burnt my skin. Rhea kept on making the same harsh gasping sound as I stumbled along the corridor, no longer feeling the cold. Only her breath on my neck, burning like fire. I lowered Rhea onto the operating table and pulled the dressing down open. Her face was contorted with pain, the lips covered by a thick, black layer of frozen blood, the tongue a mass of sparkling ice crystals. Liquid oxygen. The Dewar bottles in the workroom contained liquid oxygen. Splinters of glass had crunched underfoot as I carried Rhea out. How much of it had she swallowed? It didn't matter. Her trachea, throat and lungs must be burnt away. Liquid oxygen corrodes flesh more effectively than strong acids. Her breathing was more and more labored, with a dry sound like tearing paper. Her eyes were closed. She was dying. I looked across at the big, glass-fronted cabinets, crammed with instruments and drugs. Tracheotomy? Intubation? She had no lungs. I stared at shelves full of colored bottles and cartons. She went on, gasping hoarsely, and a wisp of vapor drifted out of her open mouth. Thermophores. I started looking for them, then changed my mind, ran to another cupboard, and turned out boxes of ampoules. Now a hypodermic, where are they? Here. Needs sterilizing. I fumbled with the lid of the sterilizer, but my numb fingers had lost all sensation and would not bend. The harsh rattle grew louder, and Rhea's eyes were open when I reached the table. I opened my mouth to say her name, but my voice had gone and my lips would not obey me. My face did not belong to me, it was a plaster mask. Rhea's ribs were heaving under the white skin. The ice crystals had melted, and her wet hair was entangled in the headrest. And she was looking at me. Rhea. It was all I could say. I stood paralyzed, my hands dangling uselessly, until a burning sensation mounted from my legs and attacked my lips and eyelids. A drop of blood melted and slanted down her cheek. Her tongue quivered and receded.
So
the
weird.
labored panting went on. I could feel no pulse in her wrist, and put my ear against her frozen breast. Faintly, behind the raging blizzard, her heart was beating so fast that I could not count the beats, and I remained crouched over her, with my eyes closed. Something brushed my head. Rhea's hand in my hair. I stood up. Chris. A harsh gasp. I took her hand, and the answering pressure made my bones creak. Then her face screwed up with agony, and she lost consciousness again. Her eyes turned. A guttural rattle tore at her throat, and her body arched with convulsions. It was all I could do to keep her on the operating table. She broke free and her head cracked against a porcelain basin. I dragged her back, and struggled to hold her down, but violent spasms kept jerking her out of my grasp.
Fuck is the last
I
one?
was pouring with sweat, and my legs were like jelly. When the convulsions abated, I tried to make her lie flat, but her chest thrust out to gulp at the air. Suddenly her eyes were staring out at me from behind the frightful blood-stained mask of her face.
Dude.
Chris, how long? How long? She choked. Pink foam appeared at her mouth, and the
Oh my
convulsions
God.
racked her again. With my last reserves of strength, I bore down on her shoulders, and she fell back. Her teeth chattered loudly.
Yeah.
No,
That's
she
good
whimpered
enough.
suddenly, and I thought that death was near. But the spasms resumed, and again I had to hold her down. Now and then, she swallowed dryly, and her ribs heaved. Then the eyelids half closed over them. Unseeing eyes, and she stiffened. This must be the end. I did not even try to wipe the foam from her mouth. A distant ringing throbbed in my head. I was waiting for her final breath before my strength failed and I collapsed to the ground. She went on breathing, and the rasp was now only a light sigh. Her chest, which had stopped heaving, moved again to the rapid rhythm of her heartbeat. Color was returning to her cheeks. Still I did not realize what was happening. My hands were clammy, and I heard as if through layers of cotton wool, yet the ringing sound continued. Ria's eyelids moved, and our eyes met. I could not speak her name from behind the mask of my face. All I could do was look at her. She turned her head and looked round the room. Somewhere behind me, in another world, a tap dripped. Ria levered herself up on her elbow. I recoiled. And again our eyes met. It didn't work, she stammered. Why are you looking at me like that? Then she screamed out loud, why are you looking at me like that? Still I could say nothing. She examined her hands, moved her fingers. Is this me? My lips formed her name, and she repeated it as a question. Ria. She let herself slide off the operating table, staggered, regained her balance, and took a few steps. She was moving in a daze, and looking at me without appearing to see me. Ria? But I am not Ria. Who am I then? And you, what about you? Her eyes widened and sparkled, and an astonished smile lit up her face. And you, Chris. Perhaps you too. I had backed away until I came up against the wall. The smile vanished. No. You are afraid. I can't take any more of this, I can't. I didn't know, I still don't understand. It's not possible. Her clenched fist struck her chest. What else could I think, except that I was real? Maybe you believe this is all an act? It isn't, I swear it isn't. Something snapped in my mind, and I went to put my arms round her, but she fought free. Don't touch me. Leave me alone. I disgust you, I know I do. Keep away. I'm not Ria. We screamed at each other and Ria tried to keep me at arm's length. I would not let her go, and at last she let her head fall to my shoulder. We were on our knees, breathless and exhausted. Chris, what do I have to do to put a stop to this? Be quiet. You don't know. She lifted her head and stared at me. It can't be done. Can it? Please. I really tried. No, go away. I disgust you and myself. I disgust myself. If I only knew how. You would kill yourself. Yes. But I want you to stay alive. I want you here, more than anything. You're lying. Tell me what I have to do to convince you. You are here. You exist. I can't see any further than that. It can't possibly be true, because I am not real. Then who are you? There was a long silence. Then she bowed her head and murmured, Real. But I know that I am not the woman you once loved. Yes. But that was a long time ago. That past does not exist, but you do. Here and now. Don't you see? She shook her head. I know that it was kindness that made you behave as you did, but there is nothing to be done. That first morning when I found myself waiting by your bed for you to wake up, I knew nothing. I can hardly believe it was only 3 days ago. I behaved like a lunatic. Everything was misty. I didn't remember anything. Wasn't surprised by anything. It was like recovering from a drugged sleep, or a long illness. It even occurred to me that I might have been ill and you didn't want to tell me. Then a few things happened to set me thinking you know what I mean. So after you met that man in the library and you refused to tell me anything, I made up my mind to listen to that tape. That was the only time I have lied to you, Chris. When you were looking for the tape recorder, I knew where it was.
You lying
The man who recorded
bitch!
the tape, what was his name? Brighten. Yes, Brighten. He explained everything. Although I still don't understand. The
They
only
talk
thing
to
is
each
that
other?
That there is no end. He didn't mention that, or if he did, it was after you woke up and I had to switch off. But I heard
What?
Enough to realize that I am not a human being, only an instrument. What are you talking about? That's what I am.
What?
To study your reactions, something of that sort.
Yes.
One of you has an instrument like me.
Yes.
We emerge from your memory or your imagination. I can't say exactly any way, you know better than I. He talks about such terrible
Each one of
things.
them
So
are
far
a test.
if it did not fit in with everything. Else I would certainly have refused to believe him. The rest? Oh, things like not needing sleep, and being compelled to go wherever you go. When I think that only yesterday I was miserable because I thought you detested me. How stupid. But how could I have imagined the truth? He Brian didn't hate that woman, the one who hates me, but he refers to her in such a dreadful way. It wasn't until then that I realized that I was helpless. Whatever I did, and that I couldn't avoid torturing you. More than that though. Instrument of torture is passive, like the stone that falls on somebody and kills. No. But an instrument of torture which loves you and wishes you nothing but good. It was too much for me. I wanted to tell you the little that I had understood. I told myself that it might be useful to you. I even tried to make notes. That time when you had the light switched on. Yes. But I couldn't write anything. I searched myself for, you know, some sign of influence. I was going mad. I felt as if there was no body underneath my skin, and there was something else instead, as if I was just an illusion meant to mislead you. You see. I see. When you can't sleep at night and your mind keeps spinning for hours on end, it can take you far away. You find yourself moving in strange directions.
Wow, this is the deepest part of this book. Oh my god. Especially talking about the freaking late night shit.
Made an analysis of my blood.
So for me, I play Banjo Kazooie.
You can tell me the truth. Now,
fucking loser.
your blood is like my own. Truly, I give you my word. What does that indicate? I had been telling myself that the unknown force might be concealed somewhere inside me, and that it might not occupy very much space. But I did not know whereabouts it was. I think now that I was evading the real issue because I didn't have the nerve to make a decision. I was afraid, and I looked for a way out. But Chris, if my blood is like yours, if I really, no, it's impossible. I would already be dead, wouldn't I? That means there really is something different, but where? In the mind. Yet it seems to me that I think as any human being does, and I know nothing.
There it is.
Was thinking
Best.
I would know everything, and I would not
Shit.
I would be pretending, and aware that I was pretending. Chris, you've got to tell me everything you know. Perhaps we could work out a solution between us. What kind of solution? She fell silent. Is it death you want? Yes, I think it is. Again silence. Rhea sat on the floor, her knees drawn up under her chin. I looked around at the white enamel fitting of gleaming instruments, perhaps looking for some unsuspected clue to suddenly materialize. Rhea, I have something to say, too. She waited quietly. It is true that we are not exactly alike, but there is nothing wrong with that. In any case, whatever else we might think about it, that difference saved your life. A painful smile flickered over her face. Does that mean that I am immortal? I don't know. At any rate, you are far less vulnerable than I am. It's horrible. Perhaps not as horrible as you think. But you don't envy me. Real, I don't know what your fate will be. It cannot be predicted.
Fuck?
More than my own or any other members of the station's personnel.
Dick.
Experiment will go on, and anything can happen. Or nothing. Or nothing. And I have to confess that nothing is what I would prefer. Not because I'm frightened, though fear is undeniably an element of this business. But because there can't be any final outcome. I'm quite sure of that. Outcome? You mean the ocean? Yes, contact with the ocean. As I see it, the problem is basically very simple. Contact means the exchange of specific knowledge, ideas, or at least of findings, definite facts. But what if no exchange is possible? If an elephant is not a giant microbe, the ocean is not a giant brain. Obviously there can be various approaches, and the consequence of one of them is that you are here, now, with me. And I am trying my hardest to make you realize that I love you. Just here.
It's too slow.
Here cancels out the 12 years of my life that went into the study of Solaris, and I want to keep you. You may have been sent to torment me, or to make my life happier, or as an instrument ignorant of its function, used like a microscope with me on the slide. Possibly you are here as a token of friendship, or a subtle punishment, or even as a joke.
That's
it could be all of those at once.
crazy, actually.
Something else completely. If you say that our future depends on the ocean's intentions, I can't deny it. I can't tell the future any more than you can. I can't even swear that I shall always love you. After what has happened already,
Bruh.
we can expect anything. Suppose tomorrow it turns me into a green jellyfish. It's out
What?
of our hands. But the decision we make today is in our hands. Let's decide to stay together. What do you say? Listen, Chris, there's something else I must ask you. Am I? Do I look very like her? You did it first. Now I don't know. I don't understand. Now all I see is you. You're sure? Yes. If you really were her, I might not be able to love you. Why? Because of what I did. Did you treat her badly? Yes, when we... Don't say any more. Why not? So that you won't forget that I am the one who is here, not her. Conversation. The following morning, I received another note from Snow. Sartorius had left. Off working on the disruptor and was getting ready for a final experiment with high-power X-rays.
There we go.
Maria, darling, I have to pay a visit to Snow. The red dawn blazing through the window divided the room in two. We were in an area of blue shadow. Everything outside this shadow zone was burnished copper. If a book had fallen from a shelf, my ear would have listened instinctively for a metallic playing. It's to do with the experiment. Only I don't know what to do about it. Please understand, I'd rather. You needn't justify yourself, Chris. If only it doesn't go on too long. It's bound to take a while. Look, do you think you could wait in the corridor? I can try. But what if I lose control? What does it feel like? I'm not asking just out of curiosity, believe me, but if we can discuss how it works, you might find some way of keeping it in check. Rhea had turned pale, but she tried to explain. I feel afraid, not of something or some person. There's no focus.
Just
only
all of those?
Sense of being lost. And I am terribly ashamed of myself. Then, when you come back, it stops. That's what made me think I might have been ill. Perhaps it's only inside the STEM station that it works. I'll make arrangements for us to get out as soon as possible. Do you think you can? Why not? I'm not a prisoner here. I'll have to talk it over with Snow. Have you any idea how long you could manage to remain by yourself? That depends. If I could hear your voice, I think might be able to hold. How? I'd rather you weren't listening. Not that I have anything to hide, but there's no telling what Snow might say. You needn't go on. I understand. I'll just stand close enough to hear the sound of your voice. I'm going to the operating room to phone him. The doors will be open. Rhea nodded agreement. I crossed the red zone. The corridor seemed dark by contrast, in spite of the lighting. Inside the open door of the operating room, fragments of the do-work.
Now do it.
The last traces of the previous night's events gleamed from under a row of
greedy little
liquid
fuck.
oxygen containers. When I took the phone off the hook, the little screen lit up, and I tapped out the number of the radio cabin. Behind the dull glass,
There we go.
spot. A bluish light grew, burst, and Snow was looking at me perched on the edge of his chair. I got your note and I want to talk to you. Can I come over? Yes. Right away. Yes. Excuse me, but are you coming alone or accompanied? Alone. His creased forehead and thin, tan face filled the screen as he leaned forward to scrutinize me through the convex glass. Then he appeared to reach me. Abrupt decision. Fine, I'll be expecting you. I went back to the cabin, where I could barely make the shape of Rhea. Behind the curtain of red sunlight, she was sitting in an armchair, with her hands clutching the armrests. She must have failed to hear my footsteps, and I saw her, for a moment, fighting the inexplicable compulsion that possessed her and wrestling with the fierce contractions of her entire body, which stopped. Immediately she saw me. I choked back a feeling of enraged in pity. We walked in silence down the long corridor with its polychrome walls. The designers had intended the variations in color to make life more tolerable. Inside the armored shell of the station, a shaft of red light ahead of us meant that the door of the radio cabin was ajar, and I looked at Rhea. She made no attempt to return my smile, totally absorbed in her preparations for the coming battle with herself. Now that the ordeal was about to begin, her face was pinched and white. 15 paces from the door, she stopped, pushing me forward gently with her fingertips as I started to turn around. Suddenly I felt that Snow, the experiment, even the station itself were not worth the agonizing price that Rhea was ready to pay. With myself as assistant torturer, I would have retraced my steps, but a shadow fell across the cabin doorway, and I hurried inside. Snow stood facing me with the red sun behind him making a halo of purple light out of his gray hair. We confronted one another without speaking, and he was able to examine me at his leisure in the sunlight that dazzled me so that I could hardly see him. I walked past him and leaned against a tall desk bristling with microphones on their flexible stalks. Snow pivoted slowly and went on staring at me with his habitual cheerless smile, in which there was no amusement, only overpowering fatigue. Still with his eyes on mine, he picked his way through the piles of objects littered about the cabin: thermic cells, instruments, spare parts for the electronic equipment. Pulled a stool up against the door of a steel cabinet.
There we go.
Sat down. I listened anxiously, but no sound came from the corridor. Why did Snow not speak? The prolonged silence was becoming exasperating. I cleared my throat. When will you and Sartorius be ready? We can start today, but the recording will take some time. Recording? You mean the encephalogram? Yes, you agreed. Is anything wrong? No, nothing. Another lengthening silence. Snow broke it. Did you have something to tell me? She knows, I whispered. He frowned, but I had the impression that he was not really surprised. Then, why pretend? I lost all desire to confide in him. All the same, I had to be honest.
Oh, my eyes,
She
dude.
started to suspect after our meeting in the library. My behavior. Various other indications. Then she found Jabarian's tape recorder and played back the tape. Snow sat intent and unmoving. Standing by the desk, my view of the corridor was blocked by the half-open door. I lowered my voice again. Last night, while I was asleep, she tried to kill herself. She drank liquid oxygen.
Oh, that's what
there
she
was a
tried
sound
to
of
do.
rustling, like paper stirred by the wind. I stopped and listened for something in the corridor, but the noise did not come from there. A mouse in the cabin? Out of the question. This was Solaris. I stole a glance at Snow. Go on, he said calmly. It didn't work, of course. Anyway, she knows who she is. Why tell me? I was taken aback for an instant, then I stammered out, so as to inform
Forgot what the layout
to keep
was.
you up to date on the situation. I warned you. You mean you knew? My voice rose involuntarily. What you have just told me. Of course not. But I explained
Oh,
the
there's a
position.
switch.
When it arrives, the visitor is almost blank, only a ghost made up of memories and vague images dredged out of its souls. The longer it stays with you, the more human it becomes. It also becomes more independent, up to a certain point. And the longer that goes on, the more difficult it gets. Snow broke off, looked me up and down, and went on reluctantly. Does she know everything? Yes, I've just told you. Everything? Does she know that she came once before, and that you? No.
Oh,
Listen,
so I can
Kelvin,
go
he smiled
out,
ruefully. If that's how it is, what do
and then I
you
can
want
go
to
back in.
do? Leave the
Cool.
station? Yes. With her? Yes. The silence while he considered his reply also revealed something else. Again, from somewhere close, and without being able to pin it down, I heard the same faint rustling in the cabin, as if through a thin partition. Snow shifted on his stool. All right. Why look at me like that? Do you think I would stand in your way? You can do as you like, Kelvin. We're in enough trouble already without putting pressure on each other. I know it will be a hopeless job to convince you. But there's something I have to say. You are doing all you can to stay human in an inhuman situation. Noble it may be, but it isn't going to get you anywhere. And I'm not so sure about it being noble, not if it's idiotic at the same time. But that's your affair. Let's get back to the point. You reneged on the experiment and take her away with you. Has it struck you that you'll only be embarking on a different kind of experiment? What do you mean? If you want to know whether she can manage it, as long as I'm with her, I don't see. I trailed to a halt. Snow sighed. All of us have our heads in the sand, Kelvin, and we know it. There's no need to put on airs. I'm not putting anything on. I'm sorry, I didn't want to offend you. I take back the airs, but I still think that you are playing the ostrich game in a particularly dangerous version. You deceive yourself, you deceive her, and you chase your own tail. Do you know the necessary conditions for stabilizing a neutrino field? No, nor do you. Nor does anyone. Exactly. All we know is that the structure is inherently unstable, and can only be maintained by means of a continuous energy input. Sartorius told me that this energy creates a rotating stabilization field. Now, does that energy come from outside the visitor, or is it generated internally? You see the difference? Yes. If it is external, Snow finished the sentence for me. Away from Solaris, the structure disintegrates. It's only a theory, of course. But one that you can verify, since you have already set up an experiment. The vehicle you launched is still in orbit. In my spare moments, I've even calculated its trajectory. You can take off,
Too bad.
intercept, and find out what happened to the passenger. You're out of your mind, I yelled. You think so? And what if we brought the shuttle down again? No. Problem, it's on remote control. We'll bring it out of orbit. Shut up. That won't do either. There's another method.
I play this game how I want to.
It
I don't think
doesn't
there's any fucking
involve
shit in
bringing
this
the shuttle
maze.
down, only establishing radio contact.
Fucking think
If
there's
she's
anything
alive,
at all.
She'll reply, and the oxygen would have run out days ago. She may not need it. Shall we try? Snow. Snow. He mimicked my intonation angrily. Kelvin.
There's
Kelvin,
literally nothing in here.
just a little. Are you a man or not? Who are you? Try
There's
it,
nothing
please.
in here.
Who do
That's
you
all
want
it
to
was.
save? Yourself.
Wrong fucking way, idiot.
And which version? Of her. This one or that one? Haven't you got the guts to face them both? Surely. You realize that you haven't thought it through. Let me tell you one last time. We are in a situation that is beyond morality. The rustling noise returned, and this time it sounded like nails scraping on a wall. All at once I was filled with a dull indifference. I saw myself, I saw both of us, from a long way off,
Okay.
as if through the wrong end of a telescope, and everything looked meaningless, trivial, and slightly ridiculous. So what do you suggest? Send up another shuttle? She would be back. Tomorrow. And the day after, and the day after that. How long do you want it to? Go on. What's the good of disposing of her if she keeps returning? How would it help me, or you, or Sartorius, or the station? No, here's my suggestion. Leave with her. You'll witness the transformation. After a few minutes, you'll see. What? A monster? A demon? No, you'll see her die. That's all. Don't think that they are immortalized. Promise you that they die. And then what will you do? Come back, for a fresh sample? He stared at me with bantering condescension. That's enough. I burst out, clenching my fists. Oh, I'm the one who has to be quiet? Look, I didn't start this conversation. And as far as I'm concerned, it has gone on long enough. Let me
There you go, bud.
some ways for you to amuse yourself.
Now I'm gonna bully you.
Motion with rods. For instance, you've got it into your head that you're a traitor if you. He waved his hand in farewell and raised his head as if to watch an imaginary ship in flight. And a good man if you keep her smiling when you feel like screaming and shamming cheerful when you want to beat your head against a wall. Isn't that being a traitor? What if it is not possible here to be anything but a traitor? What will you do? Take it out on that bastard Snow, who is the cause of it all.
I'm low on health and I have like no
Just put the
options.
lid on the rest of your troubles by acting like a complete idiot. You are talking from your own point of view. I love this girl. Her memory, you mean? No, herself. I told you what she tried to do. How many real human beings could have that much courage? So you admit. Don't quibble. Right. So she loves you. And you want to love her. It isn't the same thing. You're wrong. I'm sorry, Kelvin, but it was your idea to spill all this. You don't love her. You do love her. She is willing to give her life. So are you. It's touching, it's magnificent, anything you like, but it's out of place here, it's the wrong setting. Don't you see? No, you don't want to. You are going around in circles to satisfy the curiosity of the power
right
you
here,
don't
actually.
understand and can't control, and she is an aspect, a periodic manifestation of that power. If you were being pestered by some infatuated hag, you wouldn't think twice about packing her off. Right. I suppose so. Well then, that probably explains why she is not a hag. You feel as if your hands are tied. That's just it, they are. All you are doing is adding one more theory to the millions of theories in the library. Leave me alone, Snow, she is. No, I won't say any more. It's up to you. But remember that she is a mirror that reflects a part of your mind. If she is beautiful, it's because your memories are. You provide them. Formula. You can only finish where you started, don't forget that. What do you expect me to do? Send her away. I've already asked you. Why, and you don't answer. I'll give you an answer. It was you who wanted this conversation, not me. I haven't meddled with your affairs, and I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do. Even if I had the right, I would not. You come here of your own free will, and you dump it all on me. You know why? To take the weight off your
There we go.
back. Well, I've experienced that weight.
There.
Try to shut me up and I leave. You're free to find your own solution. But you want opposition. If I got in your
Perfect.
way, you could fight me, something tangible, a man just like you, with the same flesh and blood. Fight me, and you could feel that you too were a man. When I don't give you the excuse to fight, you quarrel with me, or rather with yourself. The one thing you've left out is telling me you'd die of grief if she suddenly disappeared. No, please, I've heard enough. I countered clumsily.
How do you get in?
Because I thought you ought to know that I intend leaving the station with her. Still on the same tack, Snow shrugged. I only offered my opinion because I realized that you were losing touch with reality. And the further you go, the harder you fall. Can you come and see Sartorius around 9 tomorrow morning? Sartorius? I thought he wasn't letting anybody in. You told me you couldn't even phone him. He seems to have reached some land of settlement. We never discuss our domestic troubles. With you, it's another matter. Will you come tomorrow morning? All right, I grunted. I noticed that Snow had
Some
left his left hand
dick.
inside the cabinet. How long had the door been ajar? Probably for some time, but in the heat of the encounter, I had not registered that the position of his hand was
Yeah,
not natural.
you have good luck with
It
that.
was as if he was concealing something or holding somebody's hand. I licked my lips.
Yeah.
Snow, what have you? You'd better leave now, he said evenly. I closed the door in the final glow of the red twilight.
Oh, I know how to open it. I know how to open
Against
it.
the wall a few
It's the
paces down
dog
the corridor.
face, so I just need to feed
She
it.
sprang to her feet at once. You see, I did it, Chris. I feel so much better. Perhaps it will be easier and easier. Yes, of course. I answered absently. We went back to my quarters. I was still speculating about that cabinet, and what had been hiding there, perhaps overhearing our entire conversation. My
Oh shit,
Cheeks
no, I
started
need
to
to
burn so hard that I
fly
involuntarily
up there.
passed the back of my hand over them. What an idiotic meeting. And where did it get us? Nowhere. But there was tomorrow morning. An abrupt thrill of fear ran through me. My encephalogram, a complete record of the workings of my brain, was to be beamed into the ocean in the form of radiation. What was it Snow had said would I suffer terribly if Rhea departed? An encephalogram records every mental process, conscious and unconscious. If I want her to disappear, will it happen? But if I wanted to get rid of her, would I also be appalled at the thought of her imminent destruction? Am I
Oh, shoot his
responsible for my unconscious?
nose.
No one else is, if not myself. How stupid to agree to let them do it. Obviously I can examine the recording before it is used, but I won't be able to decode it. Nobody could. The experts can only identify general mental tendencies. For instance, they will say that the subject is thinking about some mathematical problem, but they are unable to specify its precise terms. They claim that they have to stick to generalizations because the encephalogram cannot discriminate among the stream of simultaneous impulses, only some of which have any psychological counterpart, and they refuse point blank to hazard any comment on the unconscious processes. So how could they be expected to decipher memories which have been more or less repressed? Then why was I so afraid? I had told Rhea only that morning that the experiment could not work. If Terran neurophysiologists were incapable of decoding the recording, what chance was there for that great alien creature? Yet it had infiltrated my mind without my knowledge, surveyed my memory, and laid bare my most vulnerable point. That was undeniable. Without any assistance or radiation transmissions, it had found its way through the armored shell of the station, located me, and come away with its spoils. Chris, Rhea whispered. Standing at the window with unseeing eyes, I had not noticed the coming of darkness. A thin veiling of high cloud glowed a dim silver in the light of the vanished sun, and obscured the stars. If she disappears after the experiment, that will mean that I wanted her to disappear, that I killed her. No, I will not see Sartorius. They can't force me to cooperate. But I can't tell them the truth. I'll have to dissemble and lie, and keep on doing it. Because there may be thoughts, intentions, and cruel hopes in my mind of which I know nothing, because I am a murderer unawares. Man has gone out to explore other worlds and other civilizations without having explored his own labyrinth of dark passages and secret chambers, and without finding what lies behind doorways that he himself has sealed. Was I to abandon Rhea there out of false shame, or because I lacked the courage? Chris, said Rhea, more softly still. She was standing quite close to me. I pretended not to at that moment, I wanted to isolate myself. I had not yet resolved anything, or reached.
Are there compilations of VTubers coughing? This looks so freaking weird.
Ghosts of the stars that shone on Earth. My mind was a blank. All I had was the
I don't know why they'll look weird to me, but I think it just would.
I refused to admit that I was traveling towards what I could not reach. Apathy robbed me of the strength, even to despise myself. The thinkers. Chris, is it the experiment that's on your mind? The sound of her voice made me start with surprise. I had been lying in the dark for hours with my eyes open, unable to sleep.
Damn it.
Not hearing Rhea's breathing, I had forgotten her, letting myself drift in a tide of aimless speculation. The waking dream had lured me out of sight of the measure and meaning of reality. How did you know I wasn't asleep? Your breathing changes when you are asleep, she said gently, as if to apologize for her question. I didn't want to interfere. If you can't answer, don't. Why would I not tell you? Anyway, you guessed right, it is the experiment. What do they expect to achieve? They don't know themselves. Something. Anything. It isn't Operation Brainwave, it's Operation Desperation. Really, one of us ought to have the courage to call the experiment off and shoulder the responsibility for the decision, but the majority reckons that that kind of courage would be a sign of cowardice, and the first step in a retreat. They think it would mean an undignified surrender for mankind, as if there was any dignity in floundering and drowning in what we don't understand and never will. I stopped, but a new access of rage quickly built up. Needless to say, they're not short of arguments. They claim that even if we fail to establish contact, we won't have been wasting our time investigating the plasma, and that we shall eventually uncover the secret of matter. They know very well that they are deceiving themselves. It's
alright, where do I get the shoes again?
Where all the books are written in indecipherable language. The only thing that's familiar is the color of the.
How do I drain out the water?
Are there no other planets like this?
Oh, dude, I'm missing that whole entire fucking big ass pyramid.
In any case, it's
dumbass.
Extremely rare category, not like Earth. Earth is a common type, the grass of the universe. And we pride ourselves on this universality.
That's where I get the water out. Forgot about that.
Can't go. In that belief, we set out for other worlds, all brimming with confidence. And what were we going to do with them? Rule them or be ruled by them? That was the only idea in our pathetic minds. What a useless waste. I got out of bed and fumbled in the medicine cabinet. My fingers recognized the shape of the big bottle of sleeping pills, and I turned around in the darkness. I'm going to sleep, darling.
Fuck
Up in
is
the
this
ceiling,
stupid
ventilator
pyramid?
around.
A pyramid.
Must get some
The
sleep.
fucking.
In the morning, I woke
Fuck
up
you.
calm and refreshed. The experiment
That's
seemed
not
a
what I
heavy matter,
needed.
and I could not understand how I had managed to take them.
It's not up there either. Where's it at?
Nor was I much bothered by having to bring Rhea into the laboratory. In spite of all her exertions, she could not bear to stay out of sight and earshot for longer than 5 minutes, so I had abandoned my idea of further tests. She was even prepared to let herself be locked up somewhere. Asked her to come with me, and advised her to bring something to read. I was especially curious about what I would find in the laboratory.
The fuck is the
There's nothing
molehill?
unusual about the appearance of the big, blue and white, painted room, except that the shelves and cupboards meant to contain glass instruments seemed bare. The glass panel in one door was starred, and in some doors it was missing altogether, suggesting that there had been a struggle here recently, and that someone had done his best to remove the traces. Snow busied himself with the equipment, and behaved quite civilly, showing no surprise at the sight of Rhea, and greeting her with a quick nod of the head. I was lying down and Snow was swabbing my temples and forehead with saline solution, when a narrow door opened and Sartorius emerged from an unlighted room. He was wearing a white
There
smock
it
and
is.
black anti-radiation.
Being an
Overall,
idiot.
that came down to his ankles, and his breathing
There we
was
go.
authoritative and very professionally mannered. We might have been two researchers in
Running
some great
shoes.
institute
Perfect.
on Earth, continuing from where we had left off the day before.
It's fucking shit I
He was
wanted.
not wearing his dark glasses,
Oh, I
but I noticed
forgot
that
that
he
he
had on
also
contact
fills
lenses,
it up
which I
too.
took to be the explanation of his lack of expression. Sartorius looked on with arms folded as Snow attached the electrodes and wrapped a bandage around my head. He looked around the room several times, ignoring Rhea, who sat on a stool with her back against the wall, pretending to read. Snow stepped back, and I moved my head, which was bulging with metal discs and wires, to watch him switch on. At this point Sartorius raised his hand and launched into a flowery speech. Dr. Kelvin, may I have your attention and concentration for a moment? I do not intend to dictate any precise sequence of thought to you, for that would invalidate the experiment, but I do insist that you cease thinking of yourself, though me, our colleagues know, or anybody else.
Fuck.
Make an
Fuck.
effort to
Fuck.
eliminate any intrusion of individual personalities, and
Fuck
concentrate on
off.
your in hand. Earth and Solaris, the body of scientists considered as a single entity, although generations succeed each other and man as an individual
I
has a
fucking
limited
forget
span
about it. Just focus on getting
aspirations,
these
and our perseverance in the attempt to establish an intellectual
pieces, or else I'm
contact,
just not
the
gonna
long
get
historic
them at
knowledge
all.
of humanity, our own certitude of furthering that advance, and our determination to renounce all personal feelings in order to accomplish our mission, the sacrifices that we are prepared to make, and the hardships we stand ready to overcome. These are the themes that might properly occupy your awareness. The association of ideas does not depend entirely on your own will. However, the very fact of your presence here bears out the authenticity of the progression I have drawn to your attention. If you are unsure that you have acquitted yourself of your task, say so, I beg you, and our colleague Snow will make another recording. We have plenty of time. A dry little smile flickered over his face as he spoke these last words, but his expression remained morose. I was still trying to unravel the pompous phraseology which he had spun out with
If I
me in his
fall
grin.
off, then I can just easily just use my saves.
Ready, Chris. He was leaning with one elbow on the control panel of the electroencephalograph, looking completely relaxed. His confident tone reassured me, and I was grateful to him for calling me by my first name. Let's get started. I closed my eyes. A sudden panic had overwhelmed me after Snow had fixed the electrodes
No.
and walked over to the controls. Now it disappeared
Fuck.
just as suddenly.
You
Through
little fuck.
half-closed lids, I could see the red lights winking on the black control panel. I was no longer aware of the damp, unpleasant touch of the crown of clammy
Damn it.
electrodes. My mind was an empty gray arena ringed by a crowd of invisible onlookers massed on tiers of seats, attentive, silent, and emanating in their silence and ironic contempt for Sartorius and the mission. What should I improvise for these spectators? Rhea. I introduced her name cautiously, ready to withdraw it at once, but no protest came, and I kept going. I was drunk, with grief and tenderness, ready to suffer prolonged sacrifices.
Damn it.
My mind was pervaded
This is
with
gonna be
grief,
so
without a
fucking
body or a face,
difficult.
but alive inside me, real and imperceptible. Suddenly, as if printed over that despairing presence, I saw in the gray shadows the learned,
Come on.
professorial face of Easy, the father of Solarist studies and of Solarists. I was not visualizing the nauseating mood eruption which had swallowed up the gold-rimmed spectacles and carefully brushed mustache. I was seeing the engraving on the title page of his classic work, and the close-hatched strokes against which the artist had made his head stand out so like my father's, that head, not in its eye features but in its expression, of old-fashioned wisdom and honesty, that I was finally no longer able to tell
Fucking
which of them was looking at me, my father
every
or Easy.
fucking time.
They were dead, and neither of them buried, but then deaths without burial are not uncommon in our time. The image of Easy
God
vanished,
damn
that these two men, my father and Beezy, nothing but ashes now, had once faced up to the totality of their existence, and this conviction afforded a
Can
profound
take
calm
corners
which I
faster if I just jump up the right way.
clustered around the gray arena in the expectation of my defeat. I heard the click of circuit breakers, and light penetrated my eyelids.
Like that. If I just did that earlier.
Sartorius had not budged from his previous position.
Oh fucking no, I didn't save. Fuck. I reloaded an old save. Fuck it.
That he was amusing himself by making his sandals slap on the floor.
Damn it.
Do you think that stage 1 has been successful, Dr. Kelvin? Sartorius inquired, in the nasal voice which I had come to detest. Yes. Are you sure? He persisted, obviously rather surprised, and perhaps even suspicious. Yes. My assurance and the bluntness of my answers made him lose his composure briefly. Oh, good, he stammered. Snow came over to me and started to unwrap the bandage from my head. Sartorius stepped back, hesitated, then disappeared into the
Control.
darkness. I was
There we
rubbing the
go.
circulation back into my legs when he came out again, holding the developed film.
There we go.
Zigzag lines traced a lacy pattern along 50 feet of glistening black ribbon. My presence was no longer necessary, but I stayed, and Snow fed the ribbon into the modulator. Sartorius made a final suspicious examination of the last few feet of the spool, as if trying to decipher the content of the wavering lines. The experiment proceeded with a minimum of fuss. Snow and Sartorius each sat at a bank of controls and pushed buttons. Through the reinforced floor, I
Save that.
heard the whine of power building up in the turbines. Lights moved downward. Inside glass fronted indicators in time with the descent of the great X-ray beamer to the bottom of its housing. They came to a stop at the low limit of the indicators. Snow stepped up the power, and the white needle of the voltmeter described the left to right
There we
semicircle.
go.
The hum of current was barely audible now, as the film unwound, invisible behind the two round caps. Numbers clicked. Through the foot
Yeah, there we go.
I went over to Rhea, who was watching us over her book.
Now
She
we're
glanced
getting
up
it.
at me inquiringly. The experiment was over, and Sartorius was walking towards the heavy conical head of the machine. Can we go? Rhea mouthed silently. I replied with a nod. Rhea stood up and we left the room without taking leave of my colleagues. A superb sunset was blazing through the windows of the upper deck corridor.
Fucking
Usually the
dick,
horizon was
dude.
reddish and gloomy at this hour. This time it was a shimmering pink, laced with silver. Under the soft glow of the light, the somber foothills of the ocean shone pale violet.
I just thought maybe it would be something.
Seen it. We
It's
came to
nothing.
the bottom of the stairway, and I stopped, reluctant to wall myself up again in the prison cell of the cabin. Rhea, I want to look something up in the library. Do you mind? Of course not, she exclaimed, in a forced attempt at cheerfulness. I can find something to read. I knew only too well that a gulf had opened between us since the previous day. I should have behaved more considerately, and tried to master my apathy. But I could not summon the strength. We walked down the ramp leading to the library. There were 3 doors, giving onto the little entrance hall, and crystal globes containing flowers were spaced out along the walls. I opened the middle door, which was lined with synthetic leather on either side. I always avoided contact with this upholstery. When entering the library, we were greeted by a pleasant gust of fresh air. In spite of the stylized sun painted on the ceiling, the great circular hall had remained cool. Idly running a finger along the spines of the books, I was on the point of choosing, out of all the Solarist classics, the first volume of Easy, so as to
There we go.
refresh my memory of the portrait on the title page. When I
I'm
came
missing
upon the book
one more,
I had not noticed before, an octavo volume
which is
with a cracked
what?
binding. It was Gravinsky's compendium.
How do I get into that one other room?
Sitting in an armchair, with Rhea at my side, I leafed through Gravinsky's alphabetical classification of the various Solarist theories. The compiler, who had never set foot on Solaris, had combed through every monograph, expedition,
Oh, how do I get in
report,
there?
fragmentary outline, and provisional account, even making excerpts of incidental comments about Solaris and planetological works dealing with other worlds. He had drawn up an inventory crammed with simplistic formulations, which grossly diminished the subtlety of the ideas it resumed. Originally intended as an all-embracing account, Gravinsky's book was little more than a curiosity now. It had only been published 20 years before, but since then, such a mass of new theories had accumulated that there would not have.
Oh, the shoes. Never mind. It's not in there.
I glanced through the index practically.
I'm being
An
stupid.
obituary list.
I know what
A few of the
I'm
authors cited
missing.
were still alive, and among them, survivors none was still playing an active part in Solarist studies. Reading all these names, and adding up the sum of the intellectual efforts they represented in every field of research, it was tempting to think that surely one of the theories quoted must be correct, and that the thousands of listed hypotheses must each contain some grain of truth, could not be totally unrelated to the reality. In his introduction, Gravinsky divided the first 60 years of Solarist studies into periods. During the initial period, which began with the scouting ship that studied the planet from orbit, nobody had produced theories in the strict sense. Common sense suggested that the ocean was a lifeless chemical Conglomerate, a gelatinous mass which through its quasi-volcanic activity produced marvelous creations and stabilized its eccentric orbit by virtue of a self-generated mechanical process, as pendulum keeps itself on a fixed path. Once it is set in motion. To be precise, Magenon had come up with the idea 3 years after the first expedition, but according to the compendium the period of biological hypotheses does not begin until 9 years later, when Magenon's idea had acquired numerous supporters.
Hey, what is up, Jason Reborn? Welcome on into the stream. Come on in to chill Banjo Kazooie while losing insanity slowly due to book. Even though it's a good book. These people in this book are losing their freaking sanity. There we go. Hope you are having a good day. And yeah.
Enabled instruments to transmit stereo photographs from the interior of the asymmetry heads, once considered impossible to explore. In the hubbub of controversy, the minimal hypotheses were contemptuously dismissed, even if the long-awaited contact with the reasoning monster did not materialize.
The Gruntilda switch? I did, but where did it spawn the thing at?
Valuable chemical and physiochemical information, and enlarge our understanding of the structure of giant molecules. Nobody bothered even
oh yeah, I did. It was right over here.
Of this defeatist line of reasoning. Scientists devoted themselves to drawing up catalogs of the typical metamorphoses which are still standard works, and Frank developed his bioplasmatic theory of the memories, which has since been shown to be inaccurate, but remains a superb example of intellectual audacity and logical construction. The 30 or so years of the first 3 Gravinsky periods, with their open assurance and irresistibly optimistic romanticism, constitute the infancy of solarist studies. Already a growing skepticism heralded the age of maturity. Towards the end of the first quarter century, the early colloidal, mechanistic,
no, that's not what I needed.
Distant descendant to the concept of the Apsishikoshin, a new and almost unanimous orthodoxy which threw overboard the view of that entire generation of scientists who believed that their observations were evidence of a conscious will, teleological processes, and activity motivated by some inner need of the ocean. This point of view was now overwhelmingly repudiated, and the ground was cleared for the team headed by Holden, Ionides, and Staliva, whose lucid, analytically based speculations concentrated on scrupulous examination of a growing body of data. It was the golden age of the archivists. Microfilm libraries burst at the seams with documents. Expeditions, some of them more than 1,000 strong, were equipped with the most lavish apparatus.
It's always these parts where they're talking about like the researchers researching the planet that just is so boring to me. I don't get it.
An accelerating tempo, but the essential spirits of the research flag, and in the course of this period, still an optimistic one in spite of everything, a decline set in. The first phase of Solaristics had been shaped by the personality of men like Easy, Strobel, and Savada, who had remained adventurous whether they were asserting or attacking a theoretical position. Savada, the last of the great Solarists, disappeared near the south pole of the planet, and his death was never satisfactorily explained. He fell victim to a mistake which not even a novice would have made. Flying at low altitude, in full view of scores of observers, his aircraft had plunged into the interior of an Aegis which was not even directly in its path. There was speculation about a sudden heart attack or fainting fit, or a mechanical failure, but I have always heard that this was in fact the first suicide, brought on by the first abrupt crisis of despair. There were other crises, not mentioned in Gravinsky, whose details I was able to fill in out of my own knowledge as I stared at the yellow, closely printed pages. The later expressions of despair were in any case less dramatic, just as outstanding personalities became rarer. The recruitment of scientists to any particular field of study in a given age has never been studied as a phenomenon in its own right. Every generation throws up a fairly constant number of brilliant and determined men. The only difference lies in the direction they choose to take. The absence or presence of such individuals in a particular field of study is probably explicable in terms of the new perspectives offered. Opinions may differ about the researchers of the classical age of solarist studies, but nobody can deny their stature, even their genius. For several decades, the mysterious ocean had attracted the best mathematicians and physicists, and the top specialists in biophysics, information theory, and electrophysiology.
Uh-oh, that's bad.
Now, without warning, the
I'm alive.
found itself
I'm the best.
There remained a faceless mass of industrious collectors and compilers. The occasional original experiment might be devised, but the succession of vast expeditions mounted on a worldwide scale petered out, and the scientific world no longer echoed with ambitious, controversial theories. The machinery of solaristics fell into disrepair, and rusted over with hypotheses differentiated only in minor details.
Oh, this is later.
Concentration on the theme of the ocean's
No,
degeneration.
this isn't it yet.
Introversion.
I don't think so.
Now
I think I should go behind the thing.
concept might emerge, but It always amounted to a kind of indictment of the ocean, viewed as the end product of a development which long ago, thousands of years before, had gone through a phase of superior organization, and now had nothing more than a physical unity. The argument went that its many useless, absurd creations
Oh wait, no, it's down here. I
its death
forgot.
was impressive enough, nonetheless, which had been going
Damn
on
it.
for centuries. Thus, for instance, the extensors and memoids were seen as tumors, and all the surface processes of the huge fluid body as expressions of chaos and anarchy.
Here we go.
This approach to the problem became an obsession.
This is what I was looking for.
Years, the academic literature produced a spate of assertions which, although framed in polite, cautious terms, amounted to little more than insults. The revenge of a rabble of leaderless suitors when they realized that the object of their most pressing attentions was indifferent to the point of obstinately ignoring all their advances. A group of European psychologists once carried out a public opinion poll, spread over a period of several years. The report had
Yes.
no direct bearing on Solarist studies, and was not included in the library collection, but I had read it, and retained a clear memory of its findings. The investigators had strikingly demonstrated that the changes in lay opinion were closely correlated to the fluctuations of opinion recorded in scientific circles. That change was expressed even in the coordinating committee of the Institute of Planetology, which
What?
controls
There
the
was a
financial
thing about.
appropriations
Oh,
for
it's over
research.
here.
By means of a progressive reduction in the budgets of institutes and appointments devoted to Solarist studies, as well as by restrictions on the size of the exploration teams. Some scientists adopted a position at the other extreme, and agitated for more vigorous steps to be taken. The administrative director of the Universal Cosmological Institute ventured to assert that the living ocean did not despise men in the least, but had not noticed that,
Damn it.
as an elephant neither feels nor sees the ants crawling on its back. To attract and hold the ocean's attention, it would be necessary to devise more powerful stimuli, and gigantic machines tailored to the dimensions of the entire planet. Malicious commentators were not slow to point out that the director could well afford to be generous, since it was the Institute of Planetology which would have to foot the bill. Still, the hypotheses rained down old, resurrected hypotheses, superficially modified, simplified, or complicated to the extreme end. Solaristics, a relatively well-defined discipline in spite of its scope, became
Sucks. Went all
increasingly
this way
taken
for
phase where every
no
apparent
reason
exit led
yet.
to a dead end. In the
Need to actually go to that area I was at
Solaris
before.
was submerging under an ocean of printed paper. 2 years before I began the stint in Jabarian's laboratory, which ended when I obtained the diploma of the Institute, the Met Irving Foundation offered a huge prize to anybody who could find a viable method of tapping the energy of the ocean. The idea was not a new one. Several cargoes of plasmatic jelly had been shipped back to Earth in the past, and various methods of preservation had been patiently tested: high and low temperatures, artificial microatmospheres, and microclimates, and prolonged irradiation. The whole gamut of physical and chemical processes had been run, only to end with the same outcome: a gradual process of decomposition which passed through well-defined stages, starting with wasting, maceration, then first degree, primary, and late secondary, liquefaction. The samples removed from the plasmatic growths and creations met with the same fate, with certain variations in the phases of decomposition. The end product was always a light metallic ash. Once the scientists recognized that it was impossible to keep alive, or even in a vegetative state, any fragment of the ocean, large or small, in dissociation from the entire organism, a growing tendency developed, under the influence of the many Proric school, to isolate this problem as the key to the mystery. It was seen as a matter of interpretation solvent, and the back of the problem would be broken. The quest for this key, the philosopher's stone of Solarist studies, had absorbed the time and energy of all kinds of people with little or no scientific training. During the 4th decade of Solaristics, the craze spread like an epidemic,
No, thank
and
you,
provided
Dick.
fertile ground for the psychologists. An unknown number of cranks and ignorant fanatics toiled at their fumbling researches with a greater enthusiasm than any which had animated the old prophets of perpetual motion, or the squaring of the circle. The craze fizzled out in only a few years, and by the time I was ready to leave for Solaris, it had vanished from the headlines and from conversation, and the ocean itself was practically forgotten by the public. I took care to replace the compendium in its correct alphabetical position, and in doing so dislodged a slim pamphlet by Grastrom, one of the most eccentric authors in Solarist literature. I had read the pamphlet, which was dictated by the urge to understand what lies beyond the grasp of mankind, and aimed in particular against the individual, man, and the human species. It was the abstract, acidulous work of an autodidact who had previously made a series of unusual contributions to various marginal and rarefied branches of quantum physics. In this 15-page booklet, his magnum opus, Grastrom set out to demonstrate that the most abstract achievements of science, the most advanced
There we go.
theories and victories of mathematics represented nothing more than a stumbling 1 or 2-step progression from our rude, prehistoric, anthropomorphic understanding of the universe around us. He pointed out correspondences with the human body, the projections of our senses, the structure of our physical organization, and the physiological limitations of man in the
I don't care
equations
about that.
theory
I
of
don't need
relativity. the theorem of magnetic fields and the various unified field theories. Grastrom's conclusion was that there neither was, nor could be, any question of contact between mankind and any non-human civilization. This broadside against humanity made no specific mention of the living ocean, but its
Oh, you were quite
constant
wrong.
presence and scornful, victorious silence could be felt between every line. At any rate, such had been my own impression.
Boom.
It was Gibarayan who drew it to my attention, and it must have been Gibarayan who had added it to the station's collection, on his own authority, since Grastrom's pamphlet was regarded more as a curiosity than a true contribution to Solarist literature. With a strange
Despite it
feeling
being
almost of
really right.
respect, I carefully slid the slim pamphlet back into the crowded bookshelf, then stroked the green bronze binding of the Solaris Annual with my fingertips. In the space of a few days, we had unquestionably gained positive information about a number of basic questions, which had made seas of ink flow and fed innumerable controversies, yet had remained sterile for lack of arguments. Today the mystery practically had us under siege, and we had powerful arguments. Was the ocean a living creature? It
Yes.
could hardly be doubted any longer by any but lovers of paradox or obstinacy. It was no longer possible to deny the psychic functions of the ocean, no matter how that term might be defined. Certainly it was only too obvious that the ocean had noticed us. This fact alone invalidated the category of Solarist theories which claimed that the ocean was an introverted world, a hermit entity, deprived by a process of degeneration of the thinking
No, it
organs it once
responds,
possessed, unaware of
idiot.
the existence of external
That's
objects and
the
events,
whole
the
entire
filter
thing of it.
gigantic vortex of mental currents created and confined in the depths of this monster revolving between two suns. Not only that, we had discovered that the ocean was capable of reproducing what we ourselves had never succeeded in creating artificially, a perfect human body, modified in its subatomic structure for purposes we could not guess. The ocean lived, thought, and acted. The Solaris problem had not been annihilated by its very absurdity. We were truly dealing with a living creature. The lost faculty was not lost at all. All this now seemed proved beyond doubt. Like it or not, men must pay attention to this neighbor, light years away, but nevertheless a neighbor situated inside our sphere of expansion, and more disquieting than all the rest of the universe.
Oh damn, I thought I had
Perhaps
to
we
break
arrived
it.
at a turning point. What would the high-level decision be? Would we be ordered to give up and return to Earth, immediately or in the near future? Was it even possible that we would be ordered to liquidate the station? It was at least not improbable. But I did not favor the solution by
There we
retreat.
go.
The existence of the thinking colossus was bound to go on haunting men's minds. Even when man had explored every corner of the cosmos, and established relations with other civilizations founded by creatures similar to ourselves, Solaris would remain an eternal challenge. Misplaced among the thick volumes of the annual, I discovered a small, calf-bound book, and scanned its scuffed, worn cover for a moment. It was Muntius's Introduction to Solaristics, published many years before. I had read it in a single night, after Gibarayan had smilingly lent me his personal copy, and when I had turned the final page, the light of a new Earth dawn was shining through my window. According to Muntius, Solaristics is the space Eurus, equivalent of religion, faith disguised as science. Contact, the stated aim of Solaristics, is no less vague and obscure than the communion of the saints, or the second coming of the Messiah. Exploration is a liturgy using the language of methodology. The drudgery of the Solarists is carried out only in the expectation of fulfillment of an annunciation, for there are not and cannot be any bridges between Solaris and Earth. The comparison is reinforced by obvious parallels. Solarists reject arguments no experience is in common, no communicable notions, just as the faithful rejected the arguments that undermined the foundations of their belief. Then again, what can mankind expect or hope for out of a joint pooling of information with the living ocean? A catalogue of the vicissitudes associated with an existence of such infinite duration that it probably has no memory of its origins. A description of the aspirations, passions, and sufferings that find expression in the perpetual creation of living mountains. The apotheosis of mathematics, the revelation of plenitude in isolation and renunciation.
Damn it.
But all this represents a body of incommunicable knowledge. Transposed into any human language, the values and meanings involved lose all substance. They cannot be brought intact through the barrier. In any case, the adepts do not expect such revelations of the order of poetry, rather than science, since unconsciously it is revelation itself that they expect, and this revelation is to explain to them the meaning of the destiny of man. Solaristics is a revival of long-vanished myths, the expression of mystical nostalgias which men are unwilling to confess openly. The cornerstone is deeply entrenched in the foundations of the edifice. It is the hope of redemption. Solarists are incapable of recognizing this truth, and consequently take care to avoid any interpretation of contact, which is presented in their writings as an ultimate goal, whereas originally it had been considered as a beginning, and as a step onto a new path, among many other possible paths. Over the years, contact has become sanctified. It has become the heaven of eternity. Muntius analyzes this heresy of planetology very simply and trenchantly. He brilliantly dismantled the Solarist myth, or rather the myth of the mission.
Oh, the sound.
Banjo.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Montius had been the first voice raised in protest, and had encountered the contemptuous silence of the experts, at a time when they still retained a romantic confidence in the development of Solaristics.
Forgot about
After
that.
all, how could
That
they have
sucks.
accepted a thesis that struck at the foundations of their achievements? Solaristics went on waiting for the man who would re-establish it on a firm foundation and define its frontiers with precision. 5 years after the death of Montius, when his pamphlet had become a rare collector's piece, a group of Norwegian researchers founded a school named after him. In contact with the personalities of his various spiritual heirs, the quiet thought of the master went through profound transformations. It led to the corrosive irony of oral medicine. And, on a more mundane plane, the utilitarian or utilitarianistic solaristics of falling, who are
Even that doesn't
should
work?
settle for the immediate advantages offered by exploration, and not concern
Sucks.
itself with any intellectual communion of two civilizations, or some illusory contact. Compared with the ruthless, lucid analysis of Montius, the works of his disciples are hardly more than compilations and sometimes vulgarizations, with the exception of Enison's essays and perhaps the studies of Takata. Montius himself had already defined the complete development of solarist concepts. He called the first phase the era of the prophets, among whom he included Gizi, Holden, and Sabata. The second, the Great Schism, the fragmentation of the one solarist church into a number of waning sects, and he anticipated a third phase, which would set in.
It's gonna take
when
care of the
there was
house
nothing
as
left
a
to
whole.
investigate, and manifest itself in a crabbed academic dogmatism. This prophecy was to prove
Forgot
inaccurate,
that was a thing.
however. In my opinion, Brighten was right to characterize Montius's strictures as a monumental simplification which ignored all the aspects of solarist studies that had nothing in common with the creed, since the work of interpretation based itself only on the concrete evidence of a globe orbiting two suns. Slipped between 2 pages of Montius's pamphlet, I discovered an off-print of the quarterly review Pererga Solariana, which turned out to be one of the first articles written by Brighten, even before he
Oh,
was
because I
appointed
need to be the
director.
small fucking pumpkin for this part.
The
Damn
article
it.
was called Why I Am a Solarist, and began with a
Damn it, I
concise
forgot about that.
account of all the material phenomena which confirmed the possibility of contact. Brighten belonged to that generation of researchers who had been daring and optimistic enough to hark back to the golden age, and who did not disown their own version of a faith that overstepped the frontiers imposed by science, and yet remained concrete, since it presupposed the success of perseverance. Brighten had been influenced by the classical work in bioelectronics for which the Eurasian school of Joenmin, Giala, and Kawakits is famous. Their studies established an
pumpkin
analogy
for that
between the
too.
charted electrical activity of the brain and certain discharges occurring deep in the plasma before the appearance, for example, of elementary polymorphs or twin solarids. Brighten was opposed to anthropomorphizing interpretations and the mystifications of the
Bad.
psychoanalytic, psychiatric, and neurophysiological schools which attempted to endow the ocean with the symptoms of human illnesses, epilepsy among them, supposed to correspond with the spasmodic eruptions of the asymmetrians. He was one of the most cautious and logical proponents of contact, and saw no advantage in the kind of sensationalism which was in any case becoming more and more rare as applied to Solaris. My own doctoral thesis received a fair amount of attention, not all of it welcome.
There we
It
go.
was based on the discoveries of Bergman and Reynolds, who had succeeded in isolating and filtering the elements of the most powerful emotions, despair, grief, and pleasure out of the mass of general mental processes. Systematically comparing their recordings with the electrical discharges from the ocean, I had observed oscillations in certain parts of symmetriads
There
on
we
the
go.
bases of nascent memoids which were sufficiently analogous to deserve further investigation. The journalists pounced on my thesis, and in some newspapers my name was coupled with grotesque headlines: The Despairing Jelly, The Planet in Orgasm. But this dubious fame did have the fortunate consequence, or so I had thought a few days previously, of attracting the attention of Brighten, who naturally could not read every new publication dealing with Solaris. The letter he sent me ended a chapter of my life, and began a new one. The dreams. When 6 days passed with no reaction from the ocean, we decided to repeat the experiment. Until now, the station had been located at the intersection of the 43rd parallel and the 116th meridian.
Okay.
We moved south, maintaining a constant altitude of 1,200 feet above the ocean. Our radar-confirmed automatic observations relayed by the artificial satellite which indicated a buildup of activity in the plasma of the southern hemisphere. 48 hours later, a beam of X-rays modulated by my own brain patterns was bombarding the almost motionless surface of the ocean at regular intervals. At the end of this 2-day journey, we had reached the outskirts of the polar region.
There we go. Just
The
breaking
disk
every
of the blue
fucking
sun
window
was
in this
setting to one
place.
side of the horizon, while on the opposite side, billowing purple clouds announced the dawn of the red sun. In the sky, blinding flames and showers of green sparks clashed with the dull purple glow. Even the ocean participated in the battle between the two stars, here glittering with mercurial flashes, there with crimson reflections. The smallest cloud passing overhead brightened the shining foam on the wave crests with
There we
iridescence.
go.
The blue sun had barely set when, at the meeting of ocean and sky, indistinct and drowned drowned in blood-red mist, but signaled immediately by the detectors. A simitriad blossomed like a gigantic crystal flower. The station held its course, and after 15 minutes the colossal ruby throbbing with dying
This time I'll be
leaves was
fucking
once again
quiet.
hidden beneath the horizon. Some minutes later, a thin column spouted thousands of yards upwards into the atmosphere, its base obscured from view by the curvature of the planet. This fantastic tree, which went on growing and gushing blood and quicksilver, marked the end of it. Simitriad,
There we go.
the tangled branches at the top of the column melted into a huge mushroom shape, illuminated by both suns simultaneously, and carried on the wind, while the lower part bulged, broke up into heavy
Someone's in
clusters, and slowly sank.
trouble.
The death throes lasted well over an hour. Another 2 days passed. Our X-rays had irradiated a vast stretch of the ocean, and we made a final repetition of the experiment. From our observation post, we spotted a chain of islets 250 miles to the south. 6 rocky promontories encrusted with a snowy substance which was in fact a deposit of organic origin, proving that the mountainous formation had once been part of the ocean bed. We then moved southwest, and skirted a chain of mountains capped by clouds which gathered during the red day, and then disappeared. 10 days had elapsed since the first experiment. On the surface, not much was happening in the station. Sartorius had
There we go.
programmed the
Water.
experiment for automatic repetition at set intervals. I did not even know whether anybody was checking the apparatus for correct function. In fact, the comm was not as complete as it seemed, but not because of any human activity. I was afraid that Sartorius had no real intention of abandoning them.
Oh, my butt.
And how would Snow react when he found out that I had kept information from him and exaggerated the dangers we might run in the attempt to annihilate neutrino structures? Yet neither of the two said anything further about the project, and I kept wondering why they were so silent. I vaguely suspected them of keeping something from me. Perhaps they had been working in secret, and every day I inspected the room which housed the disruptor, a windowless cell situated directly underneath the main laboratory. I never found anybody in the room, and the layer of dust over the armatures and cables of the apparatus proved that it had not been touched for weeks. As a matter of fact, I did not meet anybody anywhere, and could not get through to Snow anymore. Nobody answered when I tried to call the radio cabin. Somebody had to be controlling the station's movements, but who? I had no idea, and oddly enough I considered the question was out of my province. The absence of response from the ocean left me equally indifferent, so much so that after 2 or 3 days I had stopped being either hopeful or apprehensive, and had completely written off the experiment and its possible results. For days on end, I remained sitting in the library or in my cabin, accompanied by the silent shadow of Rhea. I was aware that there was unease between us, and that my state of mindless suspension could not go on forever. Obviously it was up to me to break the stalemate, but I resisted the very idea of any kind of change. I was incapable of making the most trivial decision. Everything inside the station, and my relationship with Rhea in particular, felt fragile and insubstantial, as if the slightest alteration could shatter the perilous equilibrium and bring down ruin. I could not tell where this feeling originated, and the strangest thing of all is that Rhea too had a similar experience. When I look back on those moments today, I have a strong conviction that this atmosphere of uncertainty and suspense, and my presentiment of impending disaster, was provoked by an invisible presence which had taken possession
Shit, wrong one.
of the station.
I said wrong one.
That I can claim that this presence manifested
Fuck
itself
off.
just as powerfully in dreams. I have
Fuck
never had
it up.
visions of that kind before or since, so I decided to note them down and to transcribe them approximately, insofar as my vocabulary permits, given that I can convey only fragmentary glimpses, almost entirely denuded of an incommunicable horror. A blurred region, in the heart of vastness, far from earth and heaven, with no ground underfoot, no vault of sky overhead, nothing. I am the prisoner of it. Alien matter in my body is clothed in a dead, formless substance, or rather I have no body. I am that alien matter. Nebulous pale pink globules surround me, suspended in a medium more opaque than air, for objects only become clear at very close range, although when they do approach they are abnormally distinct, and their presence comes home to me with a preternatural vividness. The conviction of its substantial, tangible reality is now so overwhelming that later, when I wake up, I have the impression that I have just left a state of true perception, and everything I see after opening my eyes seems hazy and unreal. That is how the dream begins. All around me, something is awaiting my consent, my inner acquiescence, and I know, or rather the knowledge exists, that I must not give way to an unknown temptation, for the more the silence seems to promise,
Don't
the
forget
more
those
terrible the
damn
outcome
freaking
will be.
pieces just in case.
Yet I essentially know no such thing, because I would be afraid if I knew, and I never feel the slightest fear. I wait. Out of the enveloping pink mist, an invisible object emerges, and touches me. Inert, locked in the alien matter that encloses me, I can neither retreat nor turn away, and still I am being touched, my prison is being probed. And I feel this contact like a hand, and the hand recreates me. Until now, I thought I saw, but had no eyes. Now I have eyes. Under the caress of the hesitant fingers, my lips and cheeks emerge from the void, and as the caress goes further, I have a face, breath stirs in my chest, I exist. And recreated, I in my turn. Create, a face appears before me that I have never seen until now, at once. Mysterious and known. I strain to meet its gaze, but I cannot impose any direction on my own, and we discover one another mutually, beyond any effort of will, in an absorbed silence. I have become alive again, and I feel as if there is no limitation on my powers. This creature, a woman, stays near me, and we.
Where was I at? Just I don't care.
The beat of our hearts combines.
That was bad. That's
The
just stunk.
surrounding void where nothing exists or can exist, steals a presence of indefinable, unimaginable cruelty. The caress that created us in witchcraft. Us in a golden cloak becomes the crawling of innumerable fingers. Our white, naked bodies dissolve into a swarm of black creeping things, and I am we are. A mass of glutinous coiling worms, endless, and in that infinity, no, I am infinite, and I howl soundlessly, begging for death and for an end. But simultaneously I am dispersed in all directions, and my grief expands in a suffering more acute than any waking state, a pervasive, scattered pain piercing. The distant blacks and reds, hard as rock and ever increasing, a mountain of grief. Visible in the dazzling light of another world. That dream was one of the simplest. I cannot describe the others, for lack of a language to convey their dread. In those dreams, I was unaware of the existence of real, nor was there any echo of past or recent events. There were also visionless dreams, where in an unmoving, clouded silence I felt myself being slowly and minutely explored, although no instrument or hand touched me. Yet I felt myself being invaded through and through. I crumbled, disintegrated, and only emptiness remained. Total annihilation was succeeded by such terror that its memory alone makes my heart beat faster today. So the days passed, each one like the next. I was indifferent to everything, fearing only the night and unable to find a means of escape from the dreams. Bria never slept. I lay beside her, fighting against sleep, and the tenderness with which I clung to her was only a pretext, a way of avoiding the moment when I would be compelled to close my eyes. I had not mentioned these nightmares to her, but she must have guessed, for her attitude involuntarily betrayed a sense of deep humiliation. As I say, I had not seen Snow or Sartorius for some time, yet Snow gave occasional signs of life. He would leave a note at my door, or call me on the video phone, asking whether I had noticed any new event or change, or anything at all which could be interpreted as a response to the repeated X-ray bombardments. I told him no, and asked him the same question, but there in the little screen Snow only shook his head. On the 15th day after the conclusion of the experiment, I woke up earlier than usual, exhausted by the previous night's dreams. All my limbs were numbed, as if emerging from the effects of a powerful narcotic. The first rays of the red sun shone through the window, a blanket of red flame ripped over the surface of the ocean, and I realized that the vast expanse which had not been disturbed by the slightest movement in the past 4 days was beginning to stir. The dark ocean was abruptly covered by a thin veil of mist which seemed at the same time to have a very palpable consistency. Here and there the mist shook, and tremors spread out to the horizon in all directions. Now the ocean disappeared altogether beneath thick, corrugated membranes with pink swellings and pearly depressions, and these strange waves suspended above the ocean swirled suddenly and coalesced into great balls of blue-green foam. A tempest of wind hurled them upwards to the height of the station, and wherever I looked, immense membranous wings were soaring in the red sky. Some of these wings of foam, which blotted out the sun, were pitch black, and others shone with highlights of purple as they were exposed obliquely to the sunlight. Still the phenomenon continued, as if the ocean were mutating, or shedding an old scaly skin. Now and again the dark surface of the ocean could be glimpsed through a gap that the foam filled in an instant. Wings of foam planed all around me, only a few yards from the window, and one swooped to rub against the window pane, like a silken scarf. As the ocean went on giving birth to these fantastic birds, the first flights were already dissipating high above, decomposing at their zenith into transparent filaments. The station remained motionless as long as the spectacle lasted about 3 hours, until night intervened. And even after the sun had set and the shadows had spread over the ocean, the lurid glow of myriads of wings could still be discerned rising into the sky, hovering in massed ranks, and climbing effortlessly towards the light. This performance had terrified Ria, but it was no less disconcerting for me, although its novelty ought not to have been disturbing, since 2 or 3 times a year, and oftener when luck smiled on them, solarists observed forms and creations never previously recorded. The following night, an hour before the blue sunrise, we witnessed another effect. The ocean was becoming phosphorescent.
What is up, Marcel? Welcome on into the stream, dude.
Invisible waves. Isolated at first, these gray patches quickly spread and joined together, and
seemed like I was able to break that, but I think I'm wrong.
Extending as far as the eye could see. The intensity of the light grew progressively for some 15 to 20 minutes. Then the phenomenon came
Seems like that little idea is not correct.
Stretching along a front several hundred miles wide. When this moving shadow had overtaken the station, the phosphorescent part of the ocean, retreating eastward, seemed to be trying to escape from the vast extinguisher. It was like an aurora put to flight, and retreating as far as the horizon, which was edged by a fading glow before them. Darkness conquered. Shortly afterwards, the sun rose above the ocean wastes, which were furrowed by a few solidified waves, whose mercurial reflections played on my window. The phosphorescence was a recorded effect, sometimes observed before them. Eruption of an asymmetriad, but always indicative of a local increase in them. Activity of the plasma.
On that one for a second.
Nevertheless, in the course of the next 2 weeks nothing happened either inside or outside the station, except on one occasion when in the middle of the night I heard the sound of a piercing scream which came from no human throat. The shrill, protracted howling woke me out of a nightmare, and at first I thought that it was the beginning of another. Before falling asleep, I had heard
Oh my
noises
god.
coming from the direction of the laboratory.
Shit, you
part of
fucking... Why did you change the camera angle?
It sounded like heavy objects and machinery being
Yeah, you
shifted.
fucking...
When I realized that I was not dreaming, I decided that the scream also
If you didn't
came from
fucking
above,
change
but
the
did not
damn
understand how
camera
I managed to
angle,
penetrate them.
then yeah, I wouldn't
Sound
have
proceeded.
fucking done that.
The terrible sounds went on for almost half an hour, until my nerves jangled and I was pouring with sweat. I was about to go up and investigate when the screaming stopped, to be replaced by more muffled sounds, as of objects being dragged across the floor. Rhea and I were sitting in the kitchen 2 days later when Snow came in. He was dressed as people dress on Earth after their day's work, and looked like a different person, taller and older. He did not look at us,
Don't
or pull up a chair,
Fucking
but stood at the table,
pull
opened the
some
can of meat and
shit
began
on me
cramming it
like
down between
that where,
mouthfuls of
motherfucker, you got...
his jacket sleeve brushed against the greasy top of the can.
This shit's not gonna
Look
work.
out, Snow, your sleeve.
I'm gonna wait.
Look.
I'm gonna wait on that
Then
one.
went on stuffing himself
That
into
was so
his
bad.
head. Not eaten for days. He poured out a glass of wine, drank it at a gulp, sighed, and wiped his lips. Then he looked at me with bloodshot eyes, and mumbled, "So you've stopped shaving?" Rhea cleared the table. Snow swayed on his heels, then pulled a face and sucked his teeth noisily, deliberately exaggerating the action. He stared at me, insistently. "So you've decided not to shave?" I made no reply. "Believe me," he went on, "you're
Fucking!
That was how it
I
started.
thought you were gonna change the damn camera angle on me again. I didn't fucking know what
Just
you were
when I
gonna
feel like
do.
talking. Listen, Kelvin, perhaps it wishes well. Perhaps it wants to please us but doesn't quite know how to set about the job. It spies out desires in our brains, and only 2% of mental processes are conscious. That means it knows us better than we know ourselves. We've got to reach an understanding with it. Are you listening? Don't you want to? Why? He was sobbing by now. Why don't you shave? Shut up. You're drunk. Me, drunk. And what if I am? Just because I drift about from one end of space to another and poke my nose into the cosmos, does that mean I'm not allowed to get drunk? Why not?
There we go.
You believe in the mission of mankind, don't
That worked.
you, Kelvin? Ryan told me about you before he started letting his beard grow. It was a very good description. Just don't go to the lab, if you don't want to lose your faith. It belongs to Sartorius Faust in reverse. He's looking for a cure for immortality. He is the last knight of the Holy Contact, the man we need. His latest discovery is pretty good too. Prolonged dying. Not bad, Agonia. Perpetua, of the straw hats, and still you don't drink, Kelvin? He raised his swollen eyelids and looked at Rhea, who was standing quite still with her back to the wall. Then he began chanting, "O fair Aphrodite, child of ocean, your divine hand." He choked with laughter. "It fits, Ben." He broke off in a fit of coughing. Shut up and get out." I grated through clenched teeth. "You're chucking me out? You too. You don't shave and you chuck me out? What about my warnings, and my advice? Interstellar colleagues ought to help each other. Listen, Kelvin, let's go down and open the traps and call out. It might hear us. But what's its name? We have named all the stars and all the planets, even though they might already have had names of their own. What a nerve. Come on, let's go down. We'll shout at such a description of the trick it's played us that it will be touched. It will make us silver symmetrials. Pray to us. In calculus, send us its blood-stained angels. It will share our troubles and terrors, and beg us to help it die. It is already begging us, imploring us. It implores us to help it die with every one of its creations. You are not amused.
That's fine.
But you know I'm just a joker. If man had more of a sense of humor, things might have turned out differently. Do you know what he wants to do? He wants to punish this ocean, hear it screaming out of all its mountains at once. If you think he'll never have the nerve to submit his plan to that bunch of doddering ancients who sent us here to redeem sins we haven't committed, you're right, he is afraid. But he is only afraid of the little hat. He won't let anybody see the little hat. He won't dare, not Faust. I said nothing. Snow's swaying increased. Tears were streaming down his cheeks and onto his clothes. He went on. Who is responsible? Who is responsible for this situation? Ryan. Peasy. Einstein. Plato. All criminals. Just you think, in a rocket a man takes the risk of bursting like a balloon, or freezing, or roasting, or sweating all his blood out in a single gush, before he can even cry out, and all that remains is bits of bone floating inside armored hulls, in accordance with the laws of Newton is corrected by Einstein, those 2 milestones in our progress. Down the road we go, all in good faith, and see where it gets us. Think about our success, Kelvin. Think about our cabins, the unbreakable plates, the immortal sinks, legions of faithful wardrobes, devoted cupboards. I wouldn't be talking this way if I weren't drunk, but sooner or later somebody was bound to say it, weren't they? You sit there like a baby in a slaughterhouse, and you let your beard grow. Who's to blame? Find out for yourself. He turned slowly and went out, putting an arm out against the doorpost to steady himself. Then his footsteps died away along the corridor. I tried not to look at Rhea, but my eyes were drawn to hers in spite of myself. I wanted to get up, take her in my arms and stroke her hair. I did not move. Victory. Another 3 weeks. The shutters rose and fell on time. I was still a prisoner in my nightmares, and every morning the play began again. But was it a play? I put on a feigned composure, and Rhea played the same game. The deception was mutual and deliberate, and our agreement only contributed to our ultimate evasion. We talked about the future, and our life on Earth on the outskirts of some great city. We would spend the rest of our lives among green trees and under a blue sky, and never leave Earth again. Together we planned the layout of our house and garden and argued over details like the location of a hedge or a bench. I do not believe that I was sincere for a single instant. Our plans were impossible, and I knew it, for even if Rhea could leave the station and survive the voyage, how could I have got through the immigration checks with my clandestine passenger?
Yeah.
Earth admits only human beings, and even then only when they carry the necessary papers. Rhea would be detained for an identity check at the first barrier, we would be separated, and she would give herself away at once. The station was the one place where we could live together. Rhea must have known that, or found it out. One night I heard Rhea get out of bed silently. I wanted to stop her. In the darkness and silence we occasionally managed to throw off our despair for a while by making each other forget. Rhea did not notice that I had woken up. When I stretched my hand out, she was already out of bed, and walking barefoot towards the door. Without daring to raise my voice, I whispered her name. But she was outside, and a narrow shaft of light shone through the doorway from the corridor. There was a sound of whispering. Rhea was talking to somebody, but who? Panic overtook me when I tried to stand up, and my legs would not move. I listened, but heard nothing. The blood hammered through my temples. I started counting, and was approaching 1,000 when there was a movement in the doorway, and Rhea returned. She stood there for a second without moving, and I made myself breathe evenly. Chris, she whispered. I did not answer. She slid quickly into bed and lay down, taking care not to disturb me.
Though.
Questions buzzed
I
in my
remember
mind,
this.
but I would not let myself be the first to speak, and made no move. The silent questioning went on for an hour, maybe more. Then I fell asleep. The morning was like any other. I watched Rhea furtively, but could not see any change in her behavior. After breakfast, we sat at the big panoramic window. The station was hovering among purple clouds. Rhea was reading. And as I stared out, I suddenly noticed that by holding my head at a certain angle, I could see us both reflected in the window. I took my hand off the rail. Rhea had no idea that I was watching her. She glanced at me, obviously decided from my posture that I was looking at the ocean, then bent to kiss the place where my hand had rested. In a moment she was reading her book again. Rhea, I asked gently, where did you go last night? Last night? Yes. You must have been dreaming, Chris. I didn't go anywhere. You didn't leave the cabin? No. It must have been a dream. Perhaps, yes, perhaps I dreamt it. The same evening, I started talking about our return to Earth again, but Rhea stopped me. Don't talk to me about the journey again, Chris. I don't want to hear any more about it, you know very well. What? No, nothing. After we went to bed, she said that she was thirsty. There's a glass of fruit juice on the table over there. Could you give it to me? She drank half of it, then handed it to me. I'm not thirsty. Drink to my health then, she smiled. It tasted slightly bitter, but my mind was on other things. She switched it right off. Rhea, if you won't talk about the voyage, let's talk about something else. If I did not exist, would you marry? No. Never. Never. Why not? I don't know. I was by myself for 10 years and I didn't marry again. Let's not talk about that. My head was spinning as if I had been drinking too much. No, let's talk about it. What if I begged you to marry again? Don't be silly, Rhea. I don't need anybody except you. I felt her breath on my face and her arms holding me. Say it another way. I love you. Her head fell to my shoulder, and I felt tears. Rhea, what's the matter? Nothing, nothing, nothing. Her voice echoed into silence, and my eyes closed. The red dawn woke me with a splitting head and a neck so stiff that I felt as if the bones were welded together. My tongue was swollen, and my mouth felt foul. Then I reached out for Rhea, and my hand touched a cold sheet. I sat up with a start. I was alone in bed and in the cabin. The concave window reflected a row of red suns. I dragged myself out of bed and staggered over to the bathroom, reeling like a drunkard and propping myself up on the furniture. It was empty. So was the workshop. Rhea. Calling, running up and down the corridor. Rhea. I screamed, one last time, then my voice gave out. I already knew the truth. I do not remember the exact sequence of events after that, as I stumbled half naked through all the length and breadth of the station. It seems to me that I even went into the refrigeration section, searched through the storage rooms, hammered with my fists on bolted doors, then came back again to throw myself against doors which had already resisted me. I half fell down flights of steps, picked myself up and hurried onwards. When I reached the double armored doors which opened onto the ocean, I was still calling, still hoping that it was a dream. Somebody was standing by me. Hands took hold of me and pulled me away. I came to my senses again, lying on a metal table in the little workshop and gasping for breath. My throat and nostrils were burning with some alcoholic vapor. My shirt was soaked in water, and my hair plastered over my skull. Snow was busy at a medicine cupboard, shifting instruments and
There's a hole right there.
vessels which clattered with an unbearable din. Then his face appeared, looking gravely down into my eyes. Where is she? She is not here. But Rhea. He bent over me, brought his face closer, and spoke very slowly and clearly. Rhea is dead. She will come back, I whispered. Instead of dreading her return, I wanted it. I did not attempt to remind myself why I myself had once tried to drive her away, and why I had been so afraid of her return. Drink this. Snow held out a glass, and I threw it in his face. He staggered back, rubbing his eyes, and by the time he opened them again I was on my feet and standing over him. How small he was. It was you. What do you mean? Come on, Snow, you know what I mean. It was you who met her the other night. You told her to give me a sleeping pill. What has happened to her? Tell me. He felt in his shirt pocket and took out an envelope. I snatched it out of his hand. It was sealed, and there was no inscription. Inside was a sheet of paper, folded twice, and I recognized the scrawling, rather childish handwriting. My darling, I was the one who asked him. He is a good man. I am sorry I had to lie to you. I beg you to give me this one wish, hear him out, and do nothing to harm yourself. You have been marvelous. There was one more word, which she had crossed out, but I could see that she had signed Rhea. My mind was now absolutely clear. Even if I had wanted to scream hysterically, my voice had gone, and I did not even have the strength to grow.
God.
How? Later, Kelvin. You've got to calm down. I'm calm now. Tell me how. Disintegration. But, what did you use? The Roche apparatus was unsuitable. Sartorius built something else, a new destabilizer. A miniature instrument, with a range of a few yards. And she disappeared. A pop, and a puff of air. That's all. A short-range instrument. Yes, we didn't have the resources for anything bigger. The walls loomed over me, and I shut my eyes. She will come back. No. What do you know about it? You remember the wings of foam? Since that day, they do not come back. You killed her, I whispered. Yes. In my place, what else would you have done? I turned away from him and began pacing up and down the room.
Damn.
9 steps to the corner. About turn. 9 more rapid steps, and I was facing Snow. Again. Listen, we'll write a report. We'll ask for an immediate link with the council. It's feasible, and they'll accept they must. The planet will no longer be subject to the 4-power convention. We'll be authorized to use any means at our disposal. We can send for antimatter generators. Nothing can stand up against them, nothing. I was shouting now, and blinded with tears.
Fuck.
You want to destroy it? Why? Get out. Leave me
Hate
alone.
you.
No, I won't get out. Snow. I glared at him, and he shook his head. What do you want? What am I supposed to do? He walked back to the table. Fine, we'll draw up a report. I started pacing again. Sit down. I'll do what I like. There are 2 distinct questions. 1, the facts. 2, our recommendations. Do we have to talk about it now? Yes, now. I won't listen, you hear. I'm not interested in your distinctions. We sent our last message about 2 months ago, before Javarian's death. We'll have to establish exactly how the visitor phenomena function. I grabbed his arm. Will you shut up? Hit me if you like, but I will not shut up. Oh, talk away, if it gives you pleasure. I let him go. Good, listen. Sartorius will want to conceal certain facts. I'm almost certain of it. And what about you? Won't you conceal anything? No. Not now. This business goes further than individual responsibilities. You know that as well as I do. It has given a demonstration of considerable activity. It is capable of carrying out organic synthesis on the most
complex. So I never really needed to be the pumpkin for that part.
We ourselves have never managed to achieve. It knows the structure, microstructure, and metabolism of our bodies. All right, but why stop there? It has performed a series of experiments on us. Psychic vivisection. It has used knowledge which it stole from our minds without our consent. Those are not facts, Kelvin. They are not even propositions. They are theories. You could say that it has taken account of desires locked into secret recesses of our brains. Perhaps it is sending us presents. My God. I shook with a fit of uncontrollable laughter. Take it easy. Snow took hold of my hand, and I tightened my grip until I heard bones cracking. He went on looking at me without any change of expression. I let go, and walked over to a corner of the workshop. I'll try to get hold of myself. Yes,
the fuck?
Of course. I understand. What do we ask them? I leave it to you. I can't think straight right now.
You are welcome.
Did she say anything? Before? No, nothing. If you want my opinion, from now on we stand a chance. A chance? What chance? I stared at him, and light suddenly dawned. Contact? Still contact? Haven't you had enough of this madhouse? What more do you need? No, it's out of the question. Count me out. Why not? He asked quietly. You yourself instinctively treat it like a human being, now more than ever. You hate it. And you don't. No, Kelvin. It is blind. I thought that I might not have heard him correctly, or rather it sees in a different way from ourselves. We do not exist for it in the same sense that we exist for each other. We recognize one another by the appearance of the face and the body. That appearance is a transparent window to the ocean. It introduces itself directly into the brain. Right, what if it does? What are you driving at? It succeeded in recreating a human being who exists only in my memory, and so accurately that her eyes, her gestures, her voice. Don't stop. Talk. I'm talking. Her voice, because it is able to read us like a book. You see what I mean? Yes, that it could make itself understood. Doesn't that follow? No, not necessarily. Perhaps it used a formula which is not expressed in verbal terms. It may be taken from a recording imprinted on our minds, but a man's memory is stored in terms of nucleic acids etching asynchronous large molecule crystals. It removed the deepest, most isolated imprint, the most assimilated structure, without necessarily knowing what it meant to us. Suppose I'm capable of reproducing the architecture of a symmetriad, and I know its composition and have the requisite technology. I create a symmetriad, and I drop it into the ocean. But I don't know why I'm doing so. I don't know its function, and I don't know what the symmetriad means to the ocean. Yes, you may be right. In that case, it wished us no harm, and it was not trying to destroy us. Yes, it's possible, and with no intention. My mouth began to tremble. Kelvin. All right, don't get worried. You are kind. The ocean is kind. Everybody is kind. But why? Explain that. Why has it done this? What did you say to her? The truth. I asked you what you said. You know very well. Come back to my cabin and we'll write out the report. Come on. Wait. What exactly do you want? You can't be intending to remain on the station. Yes, I want to stay. The old memoir. I sat by the panoramic window, looking at the ocean. There was nothing to do. Now that the report, which had taken 5 days to compile, was only a pattern of waves in space, it would be months before a similar pattern would leave Earth to create its own line of disturbance in the gravitational field of the galaxy towards the twin suns of Solaris. Under the red sun, the ocean was darker than ever, and the horizon was obscured by a reddish mist. The weather was unusually close, and seemed to be building up towards one of the terrible hurricanes which broke out 2 or 3 times a year on the surface of the planet, whose sole inhabitant, it is reasonable to suppose, controlled the climate and willed its storms. There were several months to go before I could leave. From my vantage point in the observatory, I would watch the birth of the days a disc of pale gold, or faded purple. Now and then I would come upon the light of dawn playing among the fluid forms of some edifice risen from the ocean, watch the sun reflected on the silver sphere of a symmetriad, follow the oscillations of the graceful agiluses that curve in the wind, and linger to examine old powdery memoids. And eventually, the screens of all the video phones would start to blink and all the communications equipment would spring to life again, revived by an impulse originating billions of miles away and announcing the arrival of a metal colossus. The Ulysses, or it might be the Prometheus, would land on the station. To the piercing whine of its gravitors, and I would go out onto the flat roof to Watch the squads of white, heavy-duty robots which proceed in all innocence with their tasks, not hesitating to destroy themselves or to destroy the unforeseen obstacle, in strict obedience to the orders echoed into the crystals of their memory. Then the ship would rise noiselessly, faster than sound, leaving a sonic boom far behind over the ocean, and every passenger's face would light up at the thought of going home. What did that word mean to me? Earth? I thought of the great bustling cities, where I would wander and lose myself, and I thought of them as I had thought of the ocean on the second or third night, when I had wanted to throw myself upon the dark waves. I shall immerse myself among men. I shall be silent and attentive, an appreciative companion. There will be many acquaintances, friends, women, and perhaps even a wife. For a while, I shall have to make a conscious effort to smile, nod, stand, and perform the thousands of little gestures which constitute life on Earth, and then those gestures will become reflexes again. I shall find new interests and occupations, and I shall not give myself completely to them, as I shall never again give myself completely to anything or anybody. Perhaps at night I shall stare up at the dark nebula that cuts off the light of the twin suns, and remember everything, even what I am thinking now. With a condescending, slightly rueful smile, I shall remember my follies and my hopes. And this future Kelvin will be no less worthy a man than the Kelvin of the past, who was prepared for anything in the name of an ambitious enterprise called contact. Nor will any man have the right to judge me. Snow came into the cabin, glanced around, then looked at me again. I went over to the table. You wanted me? Haven't you got anything to do? I could give you some work. Calculations. Not a particularly urgent job. Thanks.
Here I go.
You needn't have bothered. Are you sure? Yes, I was thinking a few things over, and I wish you'd think a little less. But you don't know what I was thinking about. Tell me something. Do you believe in God? Snow darted an apprehensive glance in my direction. What? Who still believes nowadays? It isn't that simple. I don't mean the traditional God of Earth religion. I'm no expert in the history of religions, and perhaps this is nothing new. Do you happen to know if there was ever a belief in an imperfect God?
Imperfect.
What do you mean by imperfect? Snow frowned. In a way, all the gods of the old religions were imperfect, considering that their attributes were amplified human
Don't
ones.
make fun of
The God
me.
of the Old Testament, for
I had to
instance,
go down your
required
stupid toilet.
humble submission and sacrifices, and was jealous of other gods. The Greek gods had fits of sulks and family quarrels, and they were just as imperfect as mortals. No, I interrupted. I'm not thinking of a God whose imperfection arises out of the candor of his human creators, but one whose imperfection represents his essential characteristic, a God limited in his omniscience and power, fallible, incapable of foreseeing the consequences of his acts, and creating things that lead to horror. He is a sick God, whose ambitions exceed his powers and who does not realize it at first. A God who has created clocks, but not the time they measure. He has created systems or mechanisms that served specific ends but have now overstepped and betrayed them. And he has created eternity, which was to have measured his power, and which measures his unending defeat. Snow hesitated, but his attitude no longer showed any of the wary reserve of recent weeks. There was Manichaeism. Nothing at all to do with the principle of good and evil. I broke in.
There we go.
Immediately. This God has no existence outside of matter. He would like to free himself from matter, but he cannot. Snow pondered for a while. I don't know of any religion that answers your description. That kind of religion has never been necessary. If I understand you, and I'm afraid I do, what you have in mind is an evolving God, who develops in the course of time, grows, and keeps increasing in power while remaining aware of his powerlessness.
You're talking about
For your
the
God,
sea as a
divine condition
god.
is a situation without a goal, an understanding that he despairs. But isn't this despairing God of yours mankind, Kelvin? It is man you are talking about, and that is a fallacy, not just philosophically but also mystically speaking. I kept on. No, it's nothing to do with man. Man may correspond to my provisional definition from some points of view, but that is because the definition has a lot of gaps. Man does not create gods, in spite of appearances. The times, the age, impose them on him. Man can serve his age or rebel against it, but the target of his cooperation or rebellion comes to him from outside. If there was only a single human being in existence, he would apparently be able to attempt the experiment of creating his own goals in complete freedom, apparently, because a man not brought up among other human beings cannot become a man. And the being I have in mind cannot exist in the plural, you see. Oh, then in that case. He pointed out of the window. No, not the ocean either. Somewhere in its development it has probably come close to the divine state, but it turned back into itself too soon. It is more like an anchorite, a hermit of the cosmos, not a god. It repeats itself, snow, and the being I'm thinking of would never do that. Perhaps he has already been born somewhere, in some corner of the galaxy, and soon he will have some childish enthusiasm that will set him putting out one star and lighting another. We will Notice him after a while. We already have, Snow said sarcastically. Novas and supernovas. According to you, they are the candles on his altar. If you are going to take what I say literally. And perhaps Solaris is the cradle of your divine child, Snow went on, with a widening grin that increased the number of lines round his eyes. Solaris could be the first phase of the despairing god. Perhaps its intelligence will grow enormously. All the contents of our Solaris libraries could be just a record of his teething troubles. And we will have been the baby's toys for a while. It is possible. And do you know what you have just done? You've produced a completely new hypothesis about Solaris. Congratulations. Everything suddenly falls into place. The failure to achieve contact, the absence of responses, various peculiarities in its behavior towards ourselves. Everything is explicable. In terms of the behavior of a small child. I renounce paternity of the theory, Snow grunted, standing at the window. For a long instant, we stood staring out at the dark waves. A long pale patch was coming into view to the east, in the mist obscuring the horizon. Without taking his eyes off the shimmering waste, Snow asked abruptly, "What gave you this idea of an imperfect god?" "I don't know. It seems quite feasible to me. That is the only god I could imagine believing in, a god whose passion is not a redemption, who saves nothing, fulfills no purpose, a god who simply is a mimoid," Snow breathed. "What's that?" "Oh yes, I've noticed it. A very old mimoid." We both looked towards the misty horizon. "I'm going outside,"
Quite
I said
do
abruptly.
this one, you believe?
"I've never yet been off the station, and this is a good opportunity.
I
I'll
don't
be back in
think
half
much
an
else
hour."
for my pumpkin
Snow raised
self.
his eyebrows. "What? You're going out? Where are you going?" I pointed towards the flesh-colored patch half hidden by the mist. "Over there. What is there to stop me? I'll take a small helicopter. When I get back to Earth, I don't want to have to confess that I'm a Solaris who has never set foot on Solaris." I opened a locker and started rummaging through the atmosphere suits, while Snow looked on silently. Finally he said, "I don't like it." I had selected a suit. Now I turned towards him. "What?" I had not felt so excited for a long time. "What are you worrying about?" "Out with it. You're afraid that I promise you I have no intention. It never entered my mind, honestly. I'll go with you." "Thanks, but I'd rather go alone." I pulled on the suit. "Do you realize this will be my
So
first flight over
close,
the
we're
ocean?"
not done yet.
Snow muttered something, but I could not make out what. I was in a hurry to get the rest of the gear together. He accompanied me to the hangar deck and helped me drag the flicker out onto the elevator disc. As I was checking my suit, he asked me abruptly,
Fuck!
"Can I rely on your word?"
Dick.
"No fretting." "Yes, you can. Where are the oxygen tanks?" We exchanged no further words. I slid the transparent canopy shut, gave him the signal, and he set the lift going. I emerged onto the station roof. The motor burst into life, the three blades turned and the machine rose strangely light into the air. Soon the station had fallen far behind. Alone over the ocean, I saw it with a different eye. I was flying quite low, at about 100 feet, and for the first time I felt a sensation often described by the explorers but which I had never noticed from the height of the station. The alternating motion of the gleaming waves was not at all like the undulation of the sea or the billowing of clouds. It was like the crawling skin of an animal, the incessant, slow-motion contractions of muscular flesh secreting a crimson foam. When I started to bank towards the drifting mimoid, the sun shone into my eyes and blood-red flashes struck the curved canopy. The dark ocean, flickering with somber flames, was tinged with blue. The flitter came around too wide, and I was carried a long way downwind. From the mimoid, a long irregular silhouette looming out of the ocean. Emerging
Oh
from
my
the mist,
fucking
the mimoid
god.
was no longer pink, but a yellowish gray. I lost sight of it momentarily, and glimpsed the station, which seemed to be sitting on the horizon, and whose outline was reminiscent of an ancient zeppelin. I changed course, and the sheer mass of the mimoid grew in my line of vision of baroque sculpture. I was afraid of crashing into the bulbous swellings, and pulled the flicker up so brutally that it lost speed and
Fuck
started to lurch,
off.
but my caution was unnecessary, for the
Found the
rounded peaks of those
last
fantastic
few
towers were subsiding.
pieces.
I flew past the island, and
There we
slowly,
go.
yard by yard, I descended to the level of the eroded peaks. The mimoid was not large. It measured about 3/4 of a mile from end to end, and was a few hundred yards wide. In some places, it was close to splitting apart. This mimoid was obviously a fragment of a far larger formation. On the scale of Solaris, it was only a tiny splinter, weeks or perhaps months old. Among the mottled cracks overhanging the ocean, I found a kind of beach, a sloping, fairly even surface a few yards square, and steered towards it. The rotors
How many am I at?
almost hit a cliff that reared up suddenly in my path, but I landed safely.
Yes!
Cut the motor and slid back to camp.
Finished.
Standing on the fuselage,
Hell
I made
yeah.
sure that there was no chance of the filter sliding into the
Completely
ocean.
didn't even realize
Waves
that I
were
was that
licking at
close.
Jagged bank about 15 paces away, but the machine rested solidly on its legs. And I jumped to the ground. The cliff I had almost hit was a huge bony membrane pierced with holes. and full of knotty swellings. A crack several yards wide split this wall diagonally, and enabled me to examine the interior of the island, already glimpsed through the apertures in the membrane. I edged warily onto the nearest ledge, but my boots showed no tendency to slide, and the suit did not impede my movements.
Oh wait, no, I'm not done yet, not done yet, not done yet, not done yet.
The ocean, and could see a broad stretch of petrified landscape stretching back, until it was lost from sight in the depths of the memoid.
I need to be the pumpkin still.
Town, a Moroccan city tens of centuries old, convulsed by an earthquake or some other disaster.
I need the pumpkin for two reasons.
Tangled web of winding side streets choked with debris, and alleyways which fell abruptly towards the oily foam that floated close to the shore. In the middle distance, great battlements stood intact, sustained by ossified buttresses. There
Buttress.
were dark openings in the swollen, sunken walls, traces of windows or loopholes. The whole of this floating town canted to one side or another like a foundering ship, pitched and turned slowly, and the sun cast continually moving shadows, which crept among the ruined alleys. Now and again a polished surface caught and reflected the light. I took the risk of climbing higher, then stopped. Rivulets of fine sand were beginning to trickle down the rocks above my head, cascading into ravines and alleyways and rebounding in swirling clouds of dust. The memoid is not made of stone, and to dispel the illusion one only has to pick up a piece of it. It is lighter than pumice, and composed of small, very porous cells. Now I was high enough to feel the swaying of the memoid. It was moving forward, propelled by the dark muscles of the ocean towards an unknown destination, but its inclination varied.
Spooky the square pumpkin.
Oscillation was accompanied by the gentle rustling sound of the yellow and gray foam which streamed off the emerging shore. The memoid had acquired its swinging motion long before, probably at its birth, and even while it grew and broke up it had retained its initial pattern. Only now did I realize that I was not in the least concerned with the memoid, and that I had flown here not to explore the formation but to acquaint myself with the ocean. With the flitter a few paces behind me, I sat on the rough, fissured beach. A heavy black wave broke over the edge of the bank and spread out, not black, but a dirty green. The ebbing wave left viscous streamlets behind, which flowed back quivering towards the ocean. I went closer, and when the next wave came I held out my hand. What followed was a faithful reproduction of a phenomenon which had been analyzed a century before. The wave hesitated, recoiled, then enveloped my hand without touching it, so that a thin covering of air separated my glove inside a cavity which had been fluid a moment previously, and now had a fleshy consistency. I raised my hand slowly, and the wave, or rather an outcrop of the wave, rose at the same time, enfolding my hand in a translucent cyst with greenish reflections. I stood up, so as to raise my hand still higher, and the gelatinous substance stretched like a rope, but did not break.
Yeah.
The main body of the wave remained motionless on the shore, surrounding my feet without touching them, like some strange beast patiently waiting for the experiment to finish. A flower had grown out of the ocean, and its calyx was molded to my fingers.
Damn.
I stepped back. The stem trembled, stirred uncertainly, and fell back into the wave, which gathered it and
There we
receded.
go.
I repeated the game several times, until as the first experimenter had observed the wave arrived which avoided me indifferently, as if bored with a too familiar sensation. I knew that to revive the curiosity of the ocean I would have to wait several hours. Disturbed by the phenomenon I had stimulated, I sat down again. Although I had read numerous accounts of it, none of them had prepared me for the experience as I had lived it, and I felt somehow changed. In all their movements, taken together or singly, each of these branches reaching out of the ocean seemed to display a kind of cautious but not feral alertness, a curiosity avid for quick apprehension of a new, unexpected form, and regretful at having to retreat, unable to exceed the limits set by a mysterious law. The contrast was inexpressible between that lively curiosity and the shimmering immensity of the ocean that stretched away out of sight. I had never felt its gigantic presence so strongly, or its powerful changeless silence, or the secret forces that gave the waves their regular rise and fall. I sat unseeing, and sank into a universe of inertia, glided down an irresistible slope and identified myself with the dumb, fluid colossus. It was as if I had forgiven it everything, without the slightest effort of word or thought. During that last week, I had been behaving so normally that Snow had stopped keeping a watchful eye on me. On the surface, I was calm, in secret. Without really admitting it, I was waiting for something. Her return. How could I have been waiting for that? We all know that we are material creatures, subject to the laws of physiology and physics, and not even the power of all our feelings combined can defeat those laws. All we can do is detest them. The age-old faith of lovers and poets in the power of love, stronger than death, that finest Vitae said, non-amorous, is a lie, useless and not even funny. So must one be resigned to being a clock that measures the passage of time, now out of order, now repaired, and whose mechanism generates despair in love as soon as its maker sets it.
I'm not giving my spells away.
Are we to grow used to the idea that every man relives ancient torments, which are all the more profound because they grow comic with repetition?
Spells.
That human existence should repeat
Enter
itself.
the code
well,
red
but that it should
feathers.
repeat
That's actually the one that I'm actually going to need.
The drunkard keeps playing as he feeds coins into the jukebox. That liquid giant had been the death of hundreds of men. The entire human race had tried in vain to establish even the most tenuous link with it.
I can only enter in 2 of those codes, and if I do 3, my game dies.
Did not believe that it could respond to the tragedy of 2 human beings. Yet its activities did have a purpose. True, I was not absolutely certain, but leaving would mean giving up a chance, perhaps an infinitesimal one, perhaps only imaginary.
Fuck.
Must I go on living here then, among the objects we both had touched, in the air she had breathed? In the name of what? In the hope of her return. I hoped for nothing, and yet I lived in expectation.
I would actually prefer this.
That was all that remained. I did not know what achievements, what mockery, even what tortures still awaited me. I knew nothing, and I persisted in the faith that the time of cruel miracles was not past.
Mumbo magic run out. Boom boom. Did the book end? I was just finished. I was just finishing that part, and then I was like, oh, I was gonna check up on the book. Is the book over? Stop. I'm gonna close the game because I saved everything. I'm gonna make sure I saved it. Okay, go. And then if I do this and then hit that, yeah, I'm good. Oh, close the game. Am I done? Dude, perfect fucking timing. Am I done? Liquid men, the entire human race had tried in vain to establish even the most tenacious link with the believing. Moving on here then. I hoped her return. I hope for nothing. Yeah, I lived the next week. Since she had gone, as I remained. Didn't know what she was, what mockery, what torture still awaited me. I knew nothing. I persisted in faith. At the time of coming, it was not past. I finished it at the most perfect freaking time. Because it is almost 3. I need to get like freaking 6 hours of sleep before I need to wake up again. But I needed to read this freaking book. Damn. That was incredible. More like the timing wise. The book, it was still pretty good, but I still don't know exactly everything that happened. But I'll talk about it at school, so that's what's important. I hope you guys all did enjoy this stream. I'm really tired. I hope you guys like me playing more Banjo Kazooie. I'm surprised I actually remembered like so much of this information actually, for it coming back to me as I play. My eyes are super dry. Ugh. But I hope you guys did enjoy the stream. Didn't make sure to like button down below, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. I really appreciate it. It always helps me out a lot. Thank you to Jason and Marcel, even for coming in for a little bit, or anybody else who is tuning in the future. That's a weird freaking pimple. TMI, but it's okay. Yeah, thank you guys all for tuning in, and I'll check you all later. Peace out, and bye-bye.